dire need of turning this thing around? You might say so, but there are some positives to take away from this. One of which is they've had, if not one of the most challenging and one of the most difficult schedules to start the season. And if you're talking about a basket here, a play here, that record could look very different. But that could be true for a lot of teams in the NBA. I'm not banking on that. I would say this, though. Grant, the next 3 weeks, the next month, we don't know how long Draymond is going to be out, is absolutely crucial for the Golden State Warriors. As you mentioned, they're currently on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoff picture and or the play-in game. They're 2.5 back right now. Mark, if that thing gets to 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, they're not catching anybody. And it could be the beginning, and we've talked about there's a lot of conjectures. It's the beginning of the end. At that juncture, you really have to now talk about breaking it up, the end of a season, and where do you go from here? The next 3 weeks, if they can just stay competitive, if they can tread water and still be within striking distance when Draymond comes back, it changes the entire complexion on the season. So I think what they're looking at and the road ahead as far as the next month, the next potential 4 weeks of basketball is going to go a long way, not only determining what happens this year, but the future, the foundation of this team as well. Yeah, we're going to get into that all morning long here on 95.7 The Game. It's Warriors This Week. You can give us a call, 888-957-9570. That's also the Comcast Business text line. And we're keeping an eye on the YouTube chat, youtube.com/957 The Game. Jared, I see you on YouTube. Macho Man, Laser Stare, I see you as well. Keep it coming on the YouTube chat here on Warriors This Week. It's Mark Randy and Dan Devone with you here on Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game. Okay, Dan, so you say it's not as dark, it's not as, depressing for Warrior fans as you might think. Draymond Green suspended indefinitely, but you also freely admit that the next 3 weeks are incredibly important to determining this team's future. It was something that general manager Mike Dunleavy said earlier this week before the game on Thursday against the Clippers when he was asked about Draymond's suspension. How does this impact future roster decisions? And he kind of shrugged it off and said, well, the suspension doesn't really impact that. What impacts that is our play the next 15 to 20 games. So my question for you is this team good enough without Draymond Green to make the case over the next 3-4 weeks that they are competitive enough to deserve to stick it out? And are they good enough to earn the trust of the front office and the coaching staff to say, hey, you know what? We're going to give them one more try. How do they do that considering with Draymond Green this year they haven't really been all that competitive on a consistent basis? Well, they're not as good a basketball team without Draymond. Clearly, let's just get that out of the way. And clearly you can see in that game against the Clippers, they just don't have the energy. They don't have that personality. They don't have the defensive presence that is Draymond Green. Going forward, when you think about the new lineup, it's an opportunity. Jonathan Kuminga, I don't want to hear anything else. You're getting your chance. Go ahead and make
more pouting.
Make a case for yourself. You're getting run. You're getting an opportunity to start. Brandon Podziemski, I like it. I do like the new starting lineup. We can delve into that as well. But just getting back to what I said, I don't think anybody knows. But you're not going to be better without Draymond Green. That I can tell you. So this is not a team that, again, you're not looking to catch the Phoenix Suns. You're not looking to pass anybody at this point. I think ideally in the perfect world, Grant, is what you want to do is just be within that. If you're still within 2.5 games, if you're within a game and Draymond's back and we're talking a month from now, it's all right. We'd like to be, we'd like to be in that 6 or 5 seed or ideally, a little bit higher than that. But I can live with New Orleans and Phoenix and these teams that are in front of us are only a game, 2 games in front of us. That's just we go on one winning streak and we're right back in the thick of things. Again, if it doesn't work out and this is too fast for Podziemski and Jonathan Kuminga is a fraud and the Warriors begin to slide some more and the momentum begins to build, that this is a team that is reeling and circling the sink, and you get 7 or 8 games back, then the entire outlook, not only of this season, but this entire franchise changes immediately. Yeah, and I agree with you. Clearly, this is still a better team with Draymond Green than without. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about all the Warriors veterans, maybe everyone except for Stephen Curry, They're falling off a cliff. Klay Thompson can't shoot anymore. He was really good on Thursday. Andrew Wiggins, the drive doesn't seem to be there on a consistent basis. Draymond Green isn't the same defender that he once was. And while I think all of that is true to a certain extent, when you get into your mid-30s, that generally is what happens. Steph is 35. Klay and Draymond are 33. But you just look at some of the early returns on this season. When Draymond Green has either not played, so whether he's been inactive with an injury, he missed a game due to a personal reason, he's been suspended now for 6 games. In those games, and then you also include the games where he was ejected mid-game, which is 3 times, the Warriors are 3-9 in those 12 games, where either Draymond Green doesn't play a second or gets kicked out of the game mid-game. 3-9 in those 12 games. With Draymond Green, where he plays and does not get ejected, he can finish the game. They're 7-5. That's still the Draymond Green difference. Now, you could sort through every single game and say, well, there were some cupcakes in the games that he played, and sure, maybe part of that is true, but there's still no denying that this is a better Warriors team with Draymond Green than without him. And what's interesting to me is the conversation amongst Warrior fans, at least the ones that I hear, whether it's callers here on 95.7 The Game or I'm walking around the city talking with friends, all of that, the conversation is you need to get Steph Curry more help because this guy is still so incredibly good. He could be the number one on a championship team still. And I agree with that. And the conversation shifts to, well, Klay Thompson isn't holding up his end of the bargain. Andrew Wiggins isn't holding up his end of the bargain. Do you try to move those pieces to get Steph Curry more help? If you can do that, maybe you should consider it. But then when you talk about Draymond Green, who's clearly still a positive impact on this team, and I would argue, Dan, by far the second best player on the Warriors this season, when he's been available. Now, that hasn't been all that often because he has missed a lot of games, but when he's been available, he's been the second best player on this team. With that in mind, with Warriors fans' desire to help Stephen Curry all they can, you still get to a conversation with Draymond Green where Warrior fans are just done with him. They're sick of him. They're sick of all of this on-court stuff that's affecting his ability to be available. So on one end, you have struggling veterans who you might want to move on from because you need to help Stephen Curry. On the other end, you have Draymond Green, who when available is still a really good basketball player, but you just have this other stuff that's hanging over it that makes Warrior fans want to move on from this guy as well, and it kind of goes against what you're trying to accomplish because, as you said, clearly he still impacts winning at a high level.
Listen, Mark, maybe you can tell me if you think I'm drinking from the holiday punch a little bit too soon, right? Whether I'm drunk and it's not even 9 o'clock in the morning.
It'd be impressive if you were.
That's the pre-game. All right. I don't think it's as cataclysmic as we want to perceive. Look, it's not going to get any lower than this. I'm willing to bet. All right. Draymond suspension, Andrew Wiggins struggling, Klay Thompson's lack of any sort of consistency. I do believe that you just got to let this thing breathe. All right. I think Draymond will be back at some point. Is he going to be a changed man? No. Will he play better? Will he be more aware of not to punch dudes and do what it is he's done in the first part of the season? Yes. We can get into this conversation throughout the show. I just don't think people change at this point in their life within a month or 2 weeks. I mean, if change takes years and years, and that's a lot of therapy, and for Draymond, it's not a therapist. He's one of those guys that's got to go to Europe and see like a team around the clock, But Draymond will be back. I do think that Wiggins will be Wiggins, for crying out loud. He's still 29 years of age, so he doesn't fit in that paradigm or that conversation of this guy's too old.
Aging out, yeah.
Klay Thompson is going to be an inconsistent basketball player because I think that's who he is since the post-injury. And what happens with Klay going forward, I don't have as much certainty as opposed to, say, Draymond and Andrew Wiggins and, of course, Steph Curry. I do think the schedule is going to get a lot easier. I do think, again, they're going to play a lot better, and I do think they're going to start winning some games. If they don't, then the assessment can be made 3 months from now at the end of the season. I just don't buy into, oh, my God, Draymond, what the hell are we going to do with this guy? He's not normal. He's never going to play basketball again, and Andrew Wiggins is never going to be that guy. Time to trade him, time to trade Klay Thompson. We're not there yet. I would. Grant, if we're entertaining trades, I would entertain moving off of Kuminga. If this is an opportunity to showcase Jonathan Kuminga and lure another team in, I'm one of those that's on board. If he's a trade chip, I'm willing to move off on him. If we were to have this conversation a year ago, 2 years ago, I'd say, are you out of your mind? But I'm at that point where Jonathan Kuminga is now expendable. But Jonathan Kuminga is not going to bring you anything in return in terms of an impactful player, one for one. You're going to have to package him. And that's going to have to be with a Chris Paul.
Yeah. Who has a big contract.
Who has the contract, exactly. And I think one of those unprotected picks has got to go. And then it's not unlike the Lakers of a year ago, who were in a very similar situation. Remember LA at this point? Are you kidding me? Playoffs, this is a joke. Everybody just had their crosshairs focused in on LeBron James and AD. They were the biggest joke. And they knew that they had Westbrook, a trade piece, and they knew they had picks. They had 2 number 1 picks. And they knew they were going to pull the trigger. And when they did, it changed the entire season. The Warriors are slowly getting into sort of that conversation or becoming very similar as far as that comparison with making a trade during the middle of the year. And when you look at their trade capital, it's not Westbrook, but I do think if you're going to give do I want to move off of Jonathan Kuminga? No, he's a young guy with a lot of raw talent, but you're going to have to move off of somebody. And I think it's becoming apparent that it's Kuminga. It might be Chris Paul, who you don't want to lose at this point, but if you want to get Siakam, or if you do want to salvage this season, those are the tradable commodities.
Yeah, it's Chris Paul. I mean, you could throw in Klay Thompson because he's also an unexpiring contract, but I agree with you. Chris Paul would be way more likely because the Warriors are not nearly as emotionally attached to him, and I still think there is at least a decent chance that Klay Thompson figures it out on at least a little bit more of a consistent basis moving forward. Thursday, he was very good. His first real, playmaker game, he had 16 points in the third quarter. He was really good in that one. But yeah, I think your comparison to the Lakers from last year is good. They were the 7th seed.
Yeah.
They were in the play-in, and they made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. Remember, they beat the Warriors in the Western semifinals in 6 games, and they took on the Nuggets and didn't really stand much of a chance in that series because Jokic and Murray were just too good. But I think if you're Warrior fans, you would give us a shot in the Western Conference Finals one last time and see what happens. Maybe you could take down, if it's Minnesota who continues their upward trend, Oklahoma City, or if it is Denver again, or one of these other teams near the top of the Western Conference. I think that's a good comparison, but it would hinge on the Warriors making those right moves at the deadline. I mean, Jared Vanderbilt was a deadline acquisition for the Lakers last year. He was rumored to Hachimura. Vanderbilt was rumored to maybe be a Warriors target at the deadline last year. I love Jared Vanderbilt and what he brings off of the bench as a slasher, as a rim runner, as a rebounder, the Warriors could use him. I mean, the Warriors are small now. They were small with Draymond Green. They're even smaller now, and it's one of my major concerns with this lineup change for the Golden State Warriors is if you're starting Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Brandon Podziemski, Jonathan Kuminga, and then Kevon Looney, and Steve Kerr has said that group will at least start the next few games for the Golden State Warriors, so I would imagine it'll be that 5 tonight, also tomorrow in Portland. Tonight they have the Nets. Tomorrow they travel to Portland to take on the Blazers. Can that group defend anyone? I have a hard time believing that even if they're okay on the boards, which they have been really all season with and without Draymond, I'm not sure they can slow anyone down, and it happened on Thursday in Los Angeles against the Clippers. James Harden picked them apart on the pick and roll all game long. I don't think that this is a team, even with Draymond, but especially without Draymond, that can slow anyone down, and it's a big reason why I am not sure that this team can stay above water without Draymond Green. It's the defensive end.
It's the defensive end, and I would also say offensively as well. Because when you think about, if you're going to go small, what's one of the benefactors? Shooting and getting out and running. The Warriors in transition are one of the worst teams in the NBA. And if you're going to go small, that makes no sense. I think a lot of that has to do with Chris Paul. He's a little bit more methodical, and we knew that he would slow things down. But this team, statistically, by all metrics, is one of the worst in terms of transition baskets. And
when it's like a flip-flop from last year. They were the fastest team last year. Now they're one of the slowest.
Well, to that point, think about statistically where they were as far as their starting unit last year, which was one of the best.
Yeah.
And now it's one of the worst. So the Golden State Warriors, not only defensively is it a challenge, but I think offensively, if you're going to go small, then you need to get out and you need to run and you need to play sort of Warrior basketball that we've grown so familiar with over this dynastic run. But getting back to your point defensively, I do think Podziemski, I don't know if he's an upgrade from Draymond, but I don't think that defensively you're losing much with him starting. I think that the height really becomes a challenge because Draymond is, he's that guy that will play in the paint. But you're right. I think defensively it's going to be a challenge for the Golden State Warriors. Offensively, they don't get out and run. But this is a chance for Jonathan Kuminga. To me, again, I think that, and maybe Dunleavy doesn't admit this, and maybe I'm completely wrong, this is a chance to showcase his talents to a lot of people and get a lot of people lathered up that this guy, he's got that athleticism and he can go, and then pull the trigger on him. But what happens with this team going forward, I wish I could tell you that they're going to be in the hunt, that this is a team that can, that can tread water until Draymond comes back. I have no idea what the hell's going to happen with Podziemski as a starter. Jonathan Kuminga, there's nothing historically that we can base this on, right? No. So to try and tell anybody what's going to happen tonight against Brooklyn and going forward.
Good luck.
Right? We're just, we're reaching here. So we're just going to have to sit back and watch like everybody else because I have no idea.
Well, I think what you're saying about Kuminga is interesting because I think if you were to poll most Warrior fans, and you said you've switched from like a year ago, 2 years ago, you wanted the Warriors to hang on to Kuminga last year, 2 years ago, because you were a believer in his abilities. He's obviously incredibly athletic. He has a high ceiling. Will he ever reach that ceiling? Who knows? I think there were a lot of Warriors back then who were like, all right, this is a young guy. Maybe he's going to be good eventually, but he can't help Stephen Curry right now. Let's move him while we have a chance for a more proven veteran piece. That's I was of that belief. I think a lot of Warrior fans were of that belief a year ago, 2 years ago. And now I think there's a lot of Warrior fans kind of made the opposite switch that you just made that are like, okay, well, we can see this thing is on the back nine, maybe the back three holes now of this era of Warriors basketball. Let's wave the white flag and get ready for the next era. And keep Jonathan Kuminga. I think it's interesting that you have made the opposite switch, and now you say, all right, it's time, move on from him, and try to get another veteran piece in here to make one last run at it.
Yeah, I'm all about living for today and winning. So if you're telling me that this is a rebuild and we're in the transitional mode right now for the Golden State Warriors, and that we're playing for next year or the years after, and the Steph, Draymond, Klay, the dynastic run has come to an end, although I think Steph will still be a cornerstone.
Yeah.
Let me put this back on you, Grant. So do you see him as a foundational piece going forward?
Jonathan Kuminga? I don't think he's going to be a major reason that you win a championship this year or next year if you were able to do that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's not worth taking a shot. I think it goes back to what you said off the very top. The next month, 6 weeks is going to determine a ton. If, as you said, he plays well and the Warriors are able to tread water, maybe that increases his value a little bit and the Warriors can get something more back from him. But if this team continues to sputter and by the time Draymond is back, by the time the trade deadline comes around, they're 10 games under 500, I mean, you got to be realistic at some point, right? And you got to try to keep your young piece who maybe, even if you aren't certain or sure or confident that he's a future star and could be a number one, number two, or number three on a championship team in the future, what sense would it make to move off of a young guy when you feel like you don't have a present? At that point, what are you even planning for?
Maybe I have an issue now with G League Ignite guys. Seriously. I'm beginning to think that, I don't know, if I'm Bob Myers or I'm Dunleavy, you might want to rethink guys coming out of the G League and that G League Ignite. So you got Jalen Green, who's underwhelming, and you've got Scoot Henderson. Remember, Scoot was supposed to be, if it wasn't for Wembanyama,
he would have been number one.
Right? He was the guy. He's barely getting run with Portland.
He's been hurt, too. I think it's probably a little too early to tell.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying that
they haven't popped immediately.
They haven't popped, but is there a reason? I mean, think about it. You're playing, these are young kids that are playing in this league in front of 800 people in Iowa City on a Wednesday night, as opposed to somebody like that of a Trace Jackson Davis who's shooting free throws in the NCAA tournament in front of 22,000 people, not to mention, Big Ten tournaments and all these sort of things. And I'm just, I'm theorizing here a little bit, but as it relates to specifically the likes of one Jonathan Kuminga, I was just hoping to see that step. And I know he's made progress since when he first came into the league. But one thing you can bank on, Grant, is that he's going to make that. I have yet to see him play a clean game. You know, at some point, he's going to force the issue and make something out. So he thinks making something out of nothing, which essentially is a charge that any defender can see from 100 miles away.
Yeah.
He's going to go like 75 miles an hour.
Put his head down and run over someone.
And you can almost see it coming, right?
It's like Christian McCaffrey in the hole, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can almost see it coming because it gets late in the clock, right? And he's got the ball out in the wing, and all of a sudden he gets in that manic mode. It's like, oh no, here it comes. And he just puts his head down and he either gets stripped or he falls awkwardly and he goes one way and the ball goes another, or it's an obvious charge. And you can bank on that just about at least, if not once or twice a game. I don't know what the over-under is in Vegas, but that tells me that, is it ever going to slow down for him? Is he ever going to get this? And I know, look, he's still so young, but you usually like to see a level of growth, at least at year 3, because some guys like that, Podziemski, they just understand. They're old souls,
Picks
right?
it up immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it comes to that point, you get the proverbial crossroads where you're like, it's year 3. Yes, he's going to do some great things. There's a level of risk, but I'm willing to bank on that this thing never comes into complete focus for him, especially when you think about fitting in with the way the Warriors want to do it. Maybe he goes to Detroit, he goes to Washington, can run the full 94 feet and put up big numbers. But when you think about the Golden State Warriors, it's always been done a different way. Does he fit into that mode?
Yeah, I don't know. And looking at the YouTube chat here, youtube.com/957thegame, Rave says, we're trying to win games. The younger players can do that. It's not a rebuild, just won't be easy. The league is way better. So it seems like Rave is arguing that the young guys maybe at times can give you a better chance to win games. I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think I'm more in the Steve Kerr line of thinking, where if the Golden State Warriors are going to be a competitive team, if they're going to be a playoff team, if they're going to win a playoff series, not even thinking about winning a championship, but being competitive in a playoff series, if they're going to do that, Dan, what is more likely? Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins figure it out, or Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga lead you to a playoff win? It's probably going to be your veterans looking more like your veterans as opposed to your rookies or your 30-year players making giant leaps this quick.
It's got to be a combination of the both, right? It has to be your veterans finally coming around. But unlike previous years, now you have an infusion of youthful talent that you can actually use, and a bench now that can get substantial minutes. It certainly wasn't the case a year ago, and I would argue even throughout the dynastic run, potentially this might be the best, well, that's saying a lot because of Livingston and Barbosa, but maybe one of the best, if not the deepest team.
I think deepest. Maybe not best, but deepest.
Deepest team that you've had, but that depth, unlike that of Livingston and Barbosa and going back in the day of
David West and Maurice Spates.
Yeah, but you got young legs, so there's depth and there's that youthful sort of... The youthful legs, when you come into a game, it's everything because you can see that energy. And if you want to stay competitive, if we're witnessing a changing of the guard, if it is indeed Minnesota and OKC at the end of the year, well, you're going to need to match that youthful talent and that energy. And so while you have the veteran guile, right, you still have like you mentioned, if Wiggins and say Klay Thompson begin to be their old selves and you got Draymond and Steph, well, now you can also bring in these young, energetic players that are also providing impact. And I think it's a balance of the two in a perfect world that gives the Warriors an opportunity to be relevant in the playoffs this year.
I think some Warrior fans would also argue, you talked about Kuminga, and it's the same at times for Moses Moody and maybe to a lesser extent Brandon Podziemski, because while he is, I think, advanced in terms of how he feels the game and sees the game, there's still, of course, rookie moments. But specifically with Kuminga and Moody, you have those moments of like a deer in headlights or where...
Moody? Are you with Moody as well?
I mean, you see him sometimes. Okay. You see him. I mean, Kuminga is probably the poster child for this more so. Moody is a little more under control, but you still have some of those moments. I mean, there was a moment on Thursday against the Clippers, this is on the defensive end, where Norman Powell set up in the corner.
Beat him backdoor.
No screen, nothing. They're setting up the defense. Powell just cuts backdoor. Moody doesn't even see him. Like, that sort of thing still happens sometimes. I think some people would argue, okay, well, maybe if Steve Kerr gave a more consistent run the last 2 years, this year, maybe those things would have been ironed out last year. Maybe they would be in a better place now if they had more consistent run. Now, 2 years ago, I can't blame Steve Kerr at all. They won a championship. You're not going to play young guys at the risk of ruining a championship squad. Last year, when you were struggling, all the issues on the road, you win 11 road games. Maybe that's an argument that the Steve Kerr should have given some of those young guys a little bit more run, and maybe it would be looking better right now. But instead, you're still dealing with some of those growing pains of the youngsters.
I know we're up against it. We'll get to a break, but let's talk about that on the other side. About the kids with the Golden State Warriors as opposed to some of the youngsters with the other teams, the OKCs and the Minnesotas of the world.
Gotcha. We'll do that coming up on the other side. It's Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game. Dan Devone and Mark Grandy with you. More coming up right after this here on 95.7 The Game.
Thanks for calling Discover. This is Anjali.
Hi, it's Jennifer Coolidge. I just got an alert for a strange charge on my card.
No problem. We make sure you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases on your Discover card. Let's see. Did you purchase something from a t-shirt cannon store?
rely on them, lean on them a little bit more than maybe Steve Kerr was hoping at this point in the season. One, because your veterans are struggling big time, and now two, without Draymond Green, there's an extra, 30-plus minutes a night to play for everyone else, and you would guess that a majority of those minutes are going to go to Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, and hell, maybe even Trace Jackson-Davis off the bench, who got a few minutes of run against the Los Angeles Clippers. Whether Steve Kerr is confident in them or not, you're right. The Warriors are going to need their youth to kind of kick into high gear and support them for at least a little bit until they get Draymond Green back, and who knows what the future holds with Draymond Green. So whether it's more a result of the circumstance, not necessarily what Steve Kerr wants, the Warriors youngsters are going to have their chance to prove what kind of players that they could be here over the next maybe month or so.
Yeah, I think the big challenge for the Golden State Warriors, and this has been true over the last couple of years, and certainly, I'd say over the last decade, that if you're going to get drafted by the Golden State Warriors, if you're Jonathan Kuminga, you're Moses Moody, and you get an opportunity to come to the Warriors, or you're a young basketball player, it's unlike going anywhere else, typically, because you're on a short leash, all right? You're typically not going to play, and if you do, and you don't play well, you're going to get pulled. As opposed to OKC, as opposed to Detroit, as opposed to Washington, as opposed to the relevant teams at the top of the Western Conference right now, meaning OKC and Minnesota, that over the last couple of years, if you're Edwards and you get drafted, or if you're Chet Holmgren, or if you're Jalen Williams, or if you're Josh Giddey, and you go to OKC, you're going to get an opportunity to play and play through your mistakes. You're going to play, upwards to 70 to potentially, 82 games, and you'll learn. So your growth is going to be expedited. When you think about the Golden State Warriors and Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody specifically, yeah, they're still, they're lagging behind those guys simply because they just have not had the same number of minutes and the same opportunity. You can't put that on the Golden State Warriors. It's just sort of a victim of circumstance, I suppose.
Expectation of the team, the current roster.
Exactly. And when you compare the two and you look at what's happening now with the upheaval, if you will, of the Western Conference, and you have these young teams like Minnesota and OKC who have nothing but bright young stars that came into the league about the same time as Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, and you're looking at the Warriors and saying, well, how come their youth isn't as far along, and how come they don't have the sort of youth that they can rely on like some of these other teams that were able to, quote-unquote, develop younger players? Well, you're talking about two entirely different scenarios when you're rebuilding and you're playing for the future, like the OKCs and the Minnesotas of the world, and you can just roll out your youngsters and let them play. Oh, you screwed up and you committed 4 fouls in 8 minutes and you only had 5 points. That's all right. You'll be in the starting lineup tomorrow because we aren't going anywhere. That has not held true for the Golden State Warriors. I think it's important to sort of at least grasp that, or recognize where it is that the Warriors have been as opposed to some of these other teams.
There's also the reality of, maybe you also made the wrong pick a couple of times.
Definitely.
Definitely. I mean, just specifically the James Wiseman one is a major miss. He moves on to his second team and can't get any minutes when Dern, the starting center for the Pistons, is healthy. That seems like a major miss, and Wiseman's career has been very unfortunate in terms of injuries and everything that he's gone through, and his time in Memphis was cut short and all of that. You even look at the Kuminga and Moody selections. You're 100% right. Like, you can't necessarily blame the Warriors, and you can't blame Moody and Kuminga for kind of the stop and start, awkward, here we go, we're going to play 5 games, then you're going to be benched for the next week. Like, that's just kind of what happens with Steve Kerr and under this current Warriors strategy. But you can also point to, maybe you should have drafted, Wagner, who went to the Magic. Like, there are other mistakes that were made. I mean, Halliburton, you could have drafted Tyrese Halliburton instead of James Wiseman. Like, there are, and it's easy to point to all of these now. Obviously, we know the results of the draft. But you could look at Oklahoma City. You could look at the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves picked Anthony Edwards, the pick right before James Wiseman. Like, imagine if the Warriors stumbled onto an Anthony Edwards with any one of those 3 picks that they made in the top 10 of the draft. Like, we would be looking at someone who, even in the Warriors' mind, the Warriors world, the franchise of we're not going to rely on a young guy too early, too soon. If the Warriors got a legitimate future superstar, then they would be showing that already, and they would be in the starting lineup and be impacting winning in a big way. So I agree with what you're saying, but there's also the reality of, well, maybe you just misevaluated a couple of guys.
That's a great point. Because Bob Myers could not afford to miss on those guys. Because think about it, Grant. The situation that presented the Golden State Warriors, you still had the nucleus, and this is 3 years ago, where you still had a younger Steph, Draymond, and Klay, right? And you've got Wiggins. You still have the nucleus of an NBA championship team, and you're in the lottery in successive seasons. That was
3 picks.
That was the bridge to the future. You cannot screw that up, Bob Myers. And time will tell, but as of right now, he crapped the bed. He really did. And I know he's not here to defend himself, and God bless you at ESPN rocking your suits, and God bless the hair, do you. But that was it. That was the opportunity, the perfect scenario that most dynastic runs, the Boston Celtics, go back in the day with the Lakers, whomever, when we talk about dynasties don't end well. Well, the Warriors had this weird, unique opportunity for this thing to be handed down and for them to go out, singing and dancing. But it looks as though he may have screwed that up. Not only Franz Wagner, who I think would have, you talk about an ideal fit for the way the Warriors play basketball.
Alperen Şengün.
Boom! Şengün instead of Moses Moody.
I don't think people realize how good he is on the Rockets.
How big he is.
He's their best player.
Both of those guys. He's 6'11", I want to say, Şengün?
I think so. And he's like a walking triple-double. He'll give you 27 and 7 every game.
There's always a risk. As you mentioned, you can do this with every draft.
Yeah, of course.
But those picks, that was everything. When we're talking about where we're at right now, I don't think you can dismiss or not look back at what Bob Myers missed out on and not make the connection, or the connective tissue should be very apparent to everybody.
I did not expect this to turn into looking at past drafts, this kind of show, and look at the resume of Bob Myers, because obviously he's the architect of this era, this dynasty, one of the greatest dynasties, if not the greatest dynasty in Warriors or in NBA history. But you look at past drafts, like start after the Kevon Looney draft pick in 2015, right, which was a great late first-round pick. He has been vital to a number of championships for the Golden State Warriors. The picks by Bob Myers and the Warriors since then, it includes Patrick McCaw, Jordan Bell, Jacob Evans, Alan Smailagic, let's see who else, Eric Paschall. Now, the one really nice hit late in the first round was Jordan Poole. He helped you win a championship that late in the first round. That's a good pick. And I know the issues with Jordan Poole. Some of the others, Justinian Jessup, Nico Mannion, right? Then you have James Wiseman, Moses Moody, and Jonathan Kuminga. His last 3 picks as a Golden State Warriors general manager, Patrick Baldwin Jr., Ryan Rollins, and Guy Santos. And now you have the first 2 picks of the Mike Dunleavy era, Brandon Podziemski and Trace Jackson Davis. Podziemski's been the best Warriors rookie since when? Harrison Barnes, Brandon Podziemski's been phenomenal. And you just begin to go down the list of draft picks, and I know for a lot of those Bob Myers ones, it was you're picking at the end of the first round and deep into the second round, and those are lottery tickets, and they very rarely ever pan out. But the Warriors, when they were trying to extend the length of the dynasty, and you have your veteran core beginning to age out, 35-year-old Steph, 33-year-old Draymond, 33-year-old Klay, you need to find cheap talent somewhere, and you do that through the draft. And the Warriors really, until this year, hadn't been able to do that on a consistent basis other than Jordan Poole.
It's a good point. And again, we don't want to sit here.
Bob Myers is the reason that they got Kevin Durant. He's the reason they won all these championships, one of the main reasons. But, I mean, you look at the draft history, it's not pretty.
There's definitely a flip side to Bob Myers. And we all know handicapping a draft or being a GM, you're just, you're shooting in the dark. There's such a high level of risk at every professional level, but especially in the NBA. But when as you just laid out, when there's that level of consistency, something's up. And you could not, with all those picks that you just mentioned, the most important as far as extending this run, when you were given a chance to go lottery, not late first round, not second round. You didn't have to find a Draymond Green, but rather just one of the best that are coming out that are just kids. And it looks as though while the jury's still out on Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, they haven't proven themselves, but we can look at, Şengün and saying, that's a star. There's no warts on those guys, right? Mm-hmm. There's no he's got potential. Yeah, he's got potential, but he's also an impactful player right now. And the same holds true with Franz, Wagner, who's a guy that would fit in exactly with what it is the Golden State Warriors are trying to do. And while Moses Moody has potential, there's still a level of, I don't know. And Jonathan Kuminga is the biggest I don't know in the building when you're talking about young talent, that Golden State Warrior team. Two guys that they could ill afford to miss on. And it looks as though at this point, Bob Myers, it's too early to say he missed on, but he could have done a lot better in terms of upgrading the team.
Okay, but what about the current rookies, and specifically Brandon Podziemski? Because as we've already talked about, he just gets it immediately. He understands the game. It's not too quick for him. He very, very often makes the right pass, the right decision. He's good with the ball in his hands. He moves off the ball. He cuts. He's an excellent rebounder. He's similar to a GP2 in the sense that he plays much bigger than his size. He's not the tallest guy on the floor, but he's consistently up there in rebounds. Last time out, 7 rebounds, tied for the Warriors team high. Kevon Looney had 7, Brandon Podziemski had 7, and his offensive rebounding, simply the effort, was the reason why the Warriors got back within 1 point in that fourth quarter on Thursday night in Los Angeles against the Clippers. Brandon Podziemski seems to be a guy, Dan, where you can rely on him night in and night out. Not necessarily to score the ball. I mean, he was, 2 for 11 from the field, I think, on Thursday against the Clippers. He struggled. His shot has been better at times, but he was not good from the field in that game. But still, I mean, by my eye, Dan, he was one of the Warriors' most positive players on Thursday because of that effort. And that kind of effort, that energy, that enthusiasm, the second chances he's getting on the offensive boards, that effort does not slump. Your shot might go through slumps, but that energy does not. And for that reason, he's one of the Warriors' most important pieces at this moment without Draymond Green, because you know what you're going to get from him every single night. You can't say that about most of the other Warriors players.
He executes winning basketball. He makes winning plays. That doesn't necessarily show up in statistically, or there's no metrics to sort of recognize his level of importance, but that's how you win. If you can get guys like Brandon Podziemski on your basketball team, you will win more often than you lose. He is the antithesis of a Jonathan Kuminga. While he doesn't have the raw athleticism, that's what you would hope at least Jonathan Kuminga would incorporate just a little bit of where it is that Brandon Podziemski is at in year one, and he's only, a month or two into his inaugural season in the NBA. He's already proven to Steve Kerr, and I think Steve Kerr saw the twinkle in his eye early on, but he has proven that he's going to get run. I don't know if it's a starter when Draymond comes back. Maybe he is, but he has got to get significant time. He's got to be a significant player in that rotation. Maybe he moves up, maybe he's 7, maybe he's 6. Does he leapfrog Chris Paul?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's starting for Wiggins right now. He's not starting for Draymond. So logic would tell, unless something changes, it would be Wiggins that would have to retake that spot, not Draymond Green.
No, that's true. Is this just my point being is that I'm assuming he's going back to the bench, but he's still going to be in the rotation. And when he's in that rotation, does he leapfrog Chris Paul as far as being the first guy off? To your point, and we can, let's discuss this. Do you see this as just, hey, listen, Wiggs, you're in the doghouse for a couple of weeks. I need you to get straight, right? Get your head on, all right? We need you to play better basketball, and then we'll get you back in the starting lineup. Or do you see this as Podziemski really challenging him to being a starter for the Golden State Warriors and Andrew Wiggins being relegated for the bench for the remainder of the season? Or is this just an interim?
Well, it's up to Andrew Wiggins to just simply play better basketball, more consistently, play with more effort and energy and force. And I thought he was a little bit more focused on Thursday, but at some point he's going to have to start making shots. outside of the paint as well. I mean, he cannot make a jumper right now. You pair that with Podziemski's positive play, even when his shot isn't falling, and I think it became a relatively easy decision for Steve Kerr. However, if I were to handicap the starting lineup change before Thursday, before we found out that it was Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Brandon Podziemski, Jonathan Kuminga, and Kevon Looney, I would have guessed Kuminga for Draymond. That makes a lot of sense. I would have guessed Moses Moody for Andrew Wiggins because I feel like you get a little bit more size. Maybe part of it is because Paul George was out for the Clippers. If Paul George plays, maybe you feel like you need Moody to guard Paul George. Without Paul George, maybe you feel a little less threatened on the wing and you can go with a smaller defender in Brandon Podziemski. I don't know. I think it's purely an even split, an even thing from Wiggins' struggles and Podziemski's positive play. I don't know if it's a certain thing for the future. If Podziemski struggles, I think it's going to take at least Wiggins showing on a relatively consistent basis that he has figured something out. He's not going to just be thrown back into the lineup if his struggles continue during this bench run.
I think in a perfect world, you'd have Andrew Wiggins starting, obviously. You'd like to see him play better. But what Andrew Wiggins gives you that Podziemski doesn't at this point is that Andrew Wiggins is still, while Podziemski is a good defender, he's not as good as Andrew Wiggins. And Andrew Wiggins typically can still lock up the opposing team's best player.
When he's right.
When he's right.
But he hasn't really been that.
Again, this is in the perfect world.
Yeah.
So if Andrew Wiggins comes back, and also I think offensively, Podziemski's 6'2", 6'3" on a good day. So there's the height factor. They're already small to begin with, and you're substituting a guy who's clearly much smaller than a guy who's 6'7", 6'8".
Which is why I thought Moody was going to be the one-for-one swap.
Which would make sense. And maybe, to your point, maybe it had a lot more to do with the matchups in that specific game. But I think that theoretically, in the perfect world for the Golden State Warriors, you want Andrew Wiggins starting because of what he gives you defensively, and you hope that he gets on track offensively. But then getting back to the Podziemski story, I think Podziemski now becomes your sixth man. I think Podziemski is the perfect sort of guy coming off the bench. Because the other thing he's proven is that he doesn't turn the ball over. And he's a guy that, all the things that you mentioned, being this sort of old soul, and has a perfect role in this Golden State Warrior bench, which, when you thought about it at the beginning of the year, there were so many question marks, and he's sort of this diamond in the rough. As a starter right now, leapfrogging Andrew Wiggins, I'm not willing to go there, while I know sort of the consensus is Wiggins has been so bad and he sucks so bad that, go ahead, put Podziemski in. I think Podziemski's role in terms of being more impactful for the Golden State Warriors going forward is coming off the bench as opposed to a starter right now, as far as replacing Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah. Steve Kerr, head coach of the Golden State Warriors, was on with Willard and Dibs yesterday here on 95.7 The Game. Here's what he had to say about his rookie, Brandon Podziemski.
Brandon Podziemski, we can't keep off the floor. He played more minutes than anybody last night. This guy is really, really a good player. He was 2 for 11, and I thought, watching the tape, I thought he was one of our best players. So what he does just transcends the ball going in the hoop or not.
That line at the end for Steve Kerr, I agree with him 100%. Brandon Podziemski just transcends the ball going in the hoop or not. And that's what the Warriors, they would love a consistent scorer and Brandon Podziemski to become a 40% three-point shooter and all of that. But even if he's struggling offensively, as he was on Thursday, you heard it from Steve Kerr. He thought he was still one of the Warriors' best, most important players on Thursday. 34 minutes, he was 2 of 11 from the field, 4 points. But he was one of the Warriors' more positive players. And you can rely on that effort every single night. And for a team that has questions really at every roster spot, aside from Stephen Curry, maybe you can point to Dario Saric, who's been consistent off the bench. Chris Paul, maybe, although he has kind of had a little bit more of an up-and-down season than I think people are willing to admit. When you have at least something that you can rely on night in and night out, for a team that's in flux every single night, that consistency from Podziemski is very valuable.
It's winning basketball plays, and it's rare. Remember Dante DiVincenzo? He's Dante X2 at this point, because Dante would come in and give you similar sort of minutes. There was the energy, and there was always the winning basketball plays, because he was a winner. He was a winner back in his days with Villanova, and he was a winner with Milwaukee, although he didn't play in the finals. There are certain guys that, no, they're not, they're not the elite of the NBA, but they're winning basketball players. You can win with guys like that. Draymond was very similar to that when he came into the league. Draymond was all about winning basketball plays. And that's the way this dude's wired. Everything he does is giving you another opportunity offensively, taking that charge defensively, scrapping for loose balls. That's how you win basketball games. Whether he's a starter, whether he's coming off the bench, guys like that have to play because that's what transcends winning.
Let me ask you this about Brandon Podziemski. So if you were to rank...
You know what he looks like?
Who?
Remember Delonte West back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit. With the headband.
Yeah. Same kind of hair, right? Like curly and kind of grows vertical a little bit.
Although Delonte, who, by the way, was one of the... I had a chance to meet this guy in Seattle, one of the funniest dudes, but also one of the most more tragic outcomes. He was homeless at one point, but on the mend. But anyways, yeah, very... I don't know. When I see...
I can see it. Yeah.
A little bit, right?
So let me ask you this about Brandon... With Brandon Podziemski in mind, if you were to rank current Warriors players, like in terms of future value on the roster, like guys that you don't want to get rid of, guys that you want to be Warriors in the future, long term, going forward, where does Podziemski rank on that list?
He's number one. There's no doubt. He's number one.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy, yeah.
For a team filled with future Hall of Famers and guys that have won you championships. I know a lot of this, of course, is just age, simply put. And for 3 other lottery picks that were picked years ahead of him. I mean,
wait. You're talking about reserve players?
No, all players.
All players.
Yeah.
Including Steph.
Yeah, I mean, I would still have Steph number one because he's an MVP candidate, one of the greatest players in the league still. But, I mean, after Steph, who are you putting over Brandon Podziemski in terms of guys that you want to make sure are Warriors moving forward? He's up there, right?
He's up there. I don't know that I know this isn't very popular right now, but I would put Draymond maybe at number 2.
I mean, he's still got 3.5 years on his contract. So
he's going to be there regardless. If you're talking about, it's not to devalue what it is Podziemski's doing. I do think that, like with all rookies, I know we like to overreact, and there's a tendency to sort of indict guys that this is who he is going forward. Let's let it breathe a little bit. It's still his rookie year. Is it sustainable? Is he going to be this guy when we get into, February, March, and April? Is he still bringing that same? I think he will. But I do think that when a guy is in the league for, a couple of months, you do have to give it a little time before we're labeling him as being that sort of vital component to the Golden State Warriors.
I think maybe also part of it is just what the other options are. You don't have a ton of good long-term choices. So almost maybe by default, Brandon Podziemski is there. And if he's playing this effective the first 2-3 months of his career, then what might the next 3 years look like for Brandon Podziemski? Who knows? It's certainly off to a very good start for him going forward. But, I mean, if you were to look at, I don't know, the future of Moses Moody versus the future of Brandon Podziemski, what do you think means more?
Again, not to diminish what Podziemski's done, I just have seen, and I have more of a grasp of the body of work of Moses Moody, who I like. Because I think Moses Moody has proven that while he's not a star, and for whatever reason, he gets, I wouldn't call it disrespect, but sort of overlooked. Maybe it's sort of the Kevon Looney factor with him. He's such a nice dude that you're not going to offend him if you don't start him, if you don't play him, and if you don't, some guys you have to stroke, right? You have to stroke their egos and always make sure that you're talking about how good they played or how good of a player they are. You don't need to do that with him. But I digress. Again, let's just see Podziemski over a longer period of time, because one thing Moses Moody has done is that he's proven that he can do it at this level. Yeah. And while he's one of those guys that he makes winning basketball plays as well, and he's a good defender, he's just solid. He's not somebody that, he's not hunting shots. He just takes what the defense is giving you and plays within your system.
Yeah. We'll see what it looks like moving forward for the Warriors. If you can't tell, I'm a big Brandon Podziemski fan, and it seems like the Warriors stumbled onto a really nice pick in the first round this year. All right, time for a break here on Warriors This Week. 1 hour down, 2 hours to go. We want to hear from you all the way up until noon here on 95.7 The Game. D and Steel Toe, I see you. We'll get you coming up on the other side. 888-957-9570. It's Warriors This Week with Grandy and Devone. More coming up next here on 95.7 The Game.
Get in where you fit in. AC Transit wants you to drive the East Bay. Take the wheel of your career and level up. No driving experience required. Paid training is provided. New bus operators are eligible for a $2,000 bonus.
the organization on the right path, if you ask me. The job of a GM is typically to set up the roster, hire the right people, and bring in reinforcements for the future. Bob Myers didn't do that, in my opinion. The new GM, he drafted two good players, two excellent players, in my opinion. These two young kids, especially Pods, is something to be reckoned with. In the near future, you guys are going to hear a hell of a lot more about him. I mean, he has all the qualities. He has the IQ. He has the game to go with it, and the charisma. So I don't know about Trace Jackson yet because he's not getting a lot of burn. But from what I've seen from Pods, it's going to be a good pick, in my opinion.
Good call, D. Appreciate you tuning in to Warriors This Week here at 95.7 The Game. I would not go nearly as far as D saying that Bob Myers is one of the worst GMs for the Warriors. Nowhere near that. And it's very difficult. The drafting process is difficult, and when you're consistently drafting late in the first round, late in the second round, you're very rarely picking from a talent pool that is going to impact winning at the NBA level. So I am not going that far. All I'm saying is there were some misses.
You started this, Grant. Don't back up now.
This is where
you opened up this door.
I said it when I started saying it. I didn't expect this to go this direction, and I know this might derail us a little bit. But it's something that I've been thinking about often ever since Brandon Podziemski has kind of come onto the scene. And you think about how this started for Podziemski, it's really interesting because it was that in-season tournament game against the Minnesota Timberwolves at home was where Klay Thompson and Jaden McDaniels got into it, and McDaniels swings Klay around, rips his jersey. Rudy Gobert comes in and grabs Klay for a moment, and then Draymond Green pulls him away with his arm around his neck and gets suspended for 5 games. You get Klay ejected. You get Draymond Green ejected. Steph Curry was out that game, and as a result, you're kind of forced, if you're Steve Kerr, to play Brandon Podziemski, and he was the reason you were in that game down the stretch. He almost willed you to victory, Brandon Podziemski did. So if it wasn't for the Klay and Draymond Green dust-up, we might not even know who Brandon Podziemski is at this point. Now Draymond's ejected or suspended again, and there would be an opportunity at some point. But the way that we even found out about Brandon Podziemski is kind of just by happenstance because the Warriors had no one else to turn to, and he's taken advantage of it.
When it gets to Bob Myers, you're right. Look, you win an NBA title, you go to the Western Conference Finals, you're one of the best teams in the NBA, as the Warriors have been over the last 10 years. Your draft status is you're picking in the late first round, second round. But again, that wasn't the case when he had 3 picks in the lottery.
And who knows what the external pressures and factors were on him. Like there's the rumors that Wiseman was the Lake-up pick, right? But Myers has to deal with the brunt of the blame for that pick. Who knows?
Yeah,
other things going on, but
that squarely falls on him. Maybe, but you take that bullet.
Yeah, you do.
That's on him, and he missed. And it's worth the reason why. We don't bottom feed here. We're not saying, "Oh, Bob Myers sucked." Get rid of Steve Kerr. That's not what we're doing. But it is. When you think about the Golden State Warriors and their current status, you can't help but, again, recognize how they whiffed on, well, it might be a little premature to say that they whiffed on Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga, but the fact that those guys are not further along than some of the other players that they passed on in that NBA draft, there's a direct cause and effect, and public enemy number one of the culprit is one Bob Myers. That's just, when you sign up for that job, and you miss on guys, I'm sorry, man. We like you, and yeah, you get along with Draymond Green, but, dude, that's the nature of this beast. You could not afford, with the Golden State Warriors getting lottery picks and bringing back Steph, Draymond, and Klay and having Andrew Wiggins, you could not, again, I know I'm reiterating this, you could ill afford to miss on those 3 picks. He whiffed on Wiseman, and now Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga, while they're good at times, we still don't know, and there's a high level of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the guys that went behind them are much further along.
The bottom line is, if you're the Golden State Warriors, making the Wiseman pick, 4 years ago now, or 3.5 years ago now, and then the Kuminga and Moody picks 2.5 years ago now, your strategy was by now, those were going to be starters, consistent, regular contributors to winning. Not just playing and seeing what happens, but contributing to winning basketball. One of them is gone, and the other two, only one of them is starting because your power forward is suspended for who knows how long. Like, it's not gone to plan. And I know that the Warriors hated whoever came up with the 2-timeline idea, right? Like, that wasn't their creation. They didn't coin that term. It wasn't supposed to be like, all right, Steph, Klay, Dre, win us another title, and then Kuminga, Wiseman, and Moody, you're going to be the next dynasty of Warriors basketball. Like, it was supposed to be, no, you are going to be the next era, but you're also going to help win a title or two with this current era of Warriors basketball, and that just simply has not yet happened. And there are many reasons for that, whether you picked the wrong guys, whether this setup for young guys is difficult to come into and get used to and play in and develop in, as you laid out earlier. But the simple truth is the Warriors haven't gotten as much as they've needed from those picks as they were counting on, as they were banking on, as they were expecting to get. And because you have all these bloated contracts up top, you need to find values elsewhere. And in today's NBA, where there's so many giant contracts, every team is looking for that 8, 9, 10 roster spots to fill out with veteran minimum guys where they're, valuable and they can add something. Everyone is picking from that same bin. So for the Warriors to find an advantage, it was to hit in the draft. And up to this point, those picks haven't lived up to expectation. Now that can change. Jonathan Kuminga is going to get all the run he wants. As you said at the very top of the show, probably 30 minutes a game moving forward without Draymond Green. How does he perform in that? Can he take a step forward with that consistency? And will maybe our perception of that pick change moving forward? Maybe Moses Moody gets some starts at the 3 instead of Podziemski, instead of Andrew Wiggins. Maybe that happens, and maybe our perception of that pick begins to change as well. There's still a ton of time before you call it done on their careers. Like, there's still so much that can happen. But if the Warriors are going to look back at those picks and be like, that was the right pick, something has to change right now, because otherwise you're heading towards a reckoning day for the Warriors.
And as of right now, they were the wrong picks.
Yeah.
And to your point that, maybe it takes guys a little bit longer. Maybe, Jonathan Kuminga gets it not only in year 3, 4, maybe it's in year 5 or 6. It happens to guys in the NBA. But then again, we throw the Brandon Podziemski factor out there, which throws a wrench into all that thinking. Because if really they were the right guy, they would have hit the ground running, right? When you look at the guys that they passed on, and that's the only way you can measure things when it comes to Bob Myers and the guys that he took in the lottery, Franz Wagner is much further along than either Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga, as far as a plug-and-play guy that's ready to play right now, not only from a physical standpoint, but also from that sort of Brandon Podziemski, I can handle this, I get this, from between the ears and a cerebral perspective as well. Same thing with Alperen Şengün, who, his back, he played in Turkey and had played in professional basketball and was much more apt to play in the professional level, and again, was much further along. Somebody told me this that is affiliated with NBA basketball and knows this stuff much better than I, that Bob Myers, when he had the opportunity to get a Franz Wagner coming out of a program like that of the University of Michigan, as I talked about, when you're playing in the Big Ten championship games and you're playing on the road in front of 15,000 fans, and you go G League, because the G League Ignite, it's only been around for a couple of years, has yet to produce what a lot of people felt was a league that was just priming kids for the NBA draft. They were doing one thing, but again, give me that guy that has come into the NBA. It sure as hell ain't Jalen Green, and it's not Scoot Henderson, and up to this point, it's not Jonathan Kuminga. So when you just threw a vacuum, hey, here's Jonathan Kuminga, here's Franz Wagner, you went G League Ignite with a Jonathan Kuminga, someone who's raw, as opposed to a Franz Wagner, who's a much more polished product. I'm sorry, man, but in the world we live in, that's on you, Bob Myers.
All right. Yeah. I mean, the other thing with Bob Myers is obviously, what was the decision? Why did he want to leave? Is it because he could feel some of the dysfunction coming? Let me ask you this, Dan. If Bob Myers was still the general manager and, he was still in charge of the basketball operations for the Golden State Warriors, would the Draymond Green situation have escalated this far? Was he the guy keeping the top on Draymond Green, or was this bound to happen regardless? Is Bob Myers' impact that strong, or was this happening anyways?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I heard Colin Cowherd, who obviously Draymond works for Colin Cowherd, so I was kind of curious to Colin Cowherd's take. It was hilarious. He put everything on the absence basically over the last 6 months because his father figure and Bob Myers was out of the room. I can't necessarily go there. Although, Graham, think about this. Let me ask you this.
Okay.
Because I did not get this. How many ejections? I don't mean to put you on the spot. Maybe you know the answer. How many ejections? Don't look. Head up here. Eyes up here. Don't look down. No Googling.
Hands are up.
How many ejections? No, not ejections. Excuse me. How many suspensions would you say Draymond Green has had in his career?
We're talking about not number of games missed, but number of times he's been suspended?
Yes.
Well, there's the one of the finals, 2016. That's
ding,
one.
ding.
He's had 2 this year. That's at least 3. How many other times has he been suspended?
I thought the number was much higher.
I can't recall any others. I'm sure I'm missing 1 or 2. I'll guess 5?
Wow. Very well done. 6.
Is that right? Oh, it's 6.
I thought it was a lot higher. So you go back to the finals of 2015, right? He also got suspended by the Golden State Warriors with the dust-up with Kevin Durant.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, in L.A., I remember that one.
And then the last 4 have been this calendar year. So
because Sabonis, duh. I can't believe I forgot about that one in the playoffs.
He got Gobert. He got his 16th technical, which resulted in a 1-game suspension. And then, of course, this last one. So I don't know. Is there meat on that bone that 4 of the 6 suspensions have happened in this calendar year? Is there something amiss in his world? Is it attributed to Bob Myers? Can you go there?
Maybe. But I also feel like if we do that and we say, okay, the only reason that this is getting to this extreme is because Bob Myers isn't here, I think we got to hold Draymond Green a little bit more accountable for his own actions.
No doubt.
He should be able to control himself a little bit more. And now he's going to be getting counseling or
yeah, I can't go there.
Whatever the phrase is, whatever you want to call it. The NBA is encouraging it. The Warriors worked hand in hand with the league for this suspension and kind of the things he needs to check off the list before he can come back, which includes counseling. I can't really believe that Draymond Green is going to become a changed man at this point of his career, right? Like, no. It's only a matter of time before something happens again.
I think what he will do is that he won't be punching guys. Maybe he doesn't get ejected with arguing with referees. He can keep that. He can bottle that. But when you're talking about, I just have an issue, especially when it comes to mental health and you're talking about changing someone so they go back on a basketball court. Change typically doesn't happen unless you're in years and years of therapy, and it's really gradual. So the idea of, well, he's going to change over the next month. He was supposed to change after he decked Jordan Poole.
It's not like you can just flip a switch now and suddenly become a different person.
But didn't we hear very similar things being said at the podium after he decked Jordan Poole?
Well, he didn't even get suspended.
Yeah, but there was a lot of
punishment.
He had to go away and change. He's going to change. He's going to go. I don't know.
But it wasn't the same language as this time now. It was like he needs to get away from the team for a moment. He needs to think about things. I don't think there was any mention of therapy or seeing someone, getting outside help. Like, it's totally different this time.
I get it. I just don't think he'll draw with it. You know, he'll draw within the lines. He'll play like the other kids in the schoolyard. But as far as being a changed human being, that takes a lot of work for a guy who's in their mid-30s. And when it comes to Draymond Green, I think the Golden State Warriors, and Steve Kerr specifically, I think also there's a high level of accountability. It's just like when you're raising kids. If you don't reprimand them, if you don't let them know you cannot do this, then they're going to be repeat offenders. That's why this is happening. It's not that he's necessarily he's not going to change. He just needs to know where the ceiling is. And that should have happened a long time ago. Like, this is not tolerable. All right, you cannot do this. But there's never been that sort of checks and balances with him. And I think just to take it a step further, and this may sound like a bit of a reach, it's sort of the turnovers and the fouls. if you're allowed the latitude to do what it is that you're doing, because I entrust my players and that's the relationship I have with Draymond, Steph, and Klay, as opposed to just being fundamentally AAU coach and like, no, you guys are running lines for 2 days if you turn the ball over more than 15 times in a game, or you're getting pulled after that last turnover. If there was just more of a cause and effect, maybe you don't get to these lanes.
Maybe, and I think like for the league, and the Warriors are probably more so just forced to do what the league wants them to do. They can come out and say all they want about we worked hand in hand and we came to this agreement together, because obviously like the individual, Steve Kerr and Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson and Kevon Looney, they all care about Draymond Green, the person, obviously. The Warriors as an organization need Draymond Green because he's a valuable player to them. The league has to be thinking about protecting their backs, right? The league is about to enter the new TV negotiating deal.
Everything.
And if you're trying to negotiate for as much money as you can, people don't come to watch the NBA for the violence on the court that Draymond has been displaying, as you laid out, on a more consistent basis now more than ever before. So the league is trying to protect their own money, right? They're forced into making this sort of suspension and decision on Draymond Green, and they could pass it off as, we care about the person Draymond Green and we want him to get help. But, they're not fooling anyone, right? We know that they're trying to protect themselves as well. And my question to you would be, how much of this is the league realizing Draymond has a problem and he needs to fix it versus we just can't have this in our game anymore? The league, our audience, the future has changed. It's not what it was in the 80s anymore.
Grant, I'll add another component to that. I think the players' union might be involved. Like, we cannot have our players in an NBA game getting cold cocked. Like, you got to protect your players. Draymond's to the point where you cannot just haul off and hit dudes. Like, that could be a lot more severe. So it's getting to the point where the NBA is like, we have to protect the players. Man, we cannot just let dudes, potentially get their eye gouged because Draymond's having one of those moments. Like, NBA players didn't sign up for this, right? This isn't the NFL. You can't go after guys. That's just a little bit too vicious. I would say, though, and sort of just to push back a little bit, that, I get it. The media rights deal is up, and you're talking billions of dollars that are on the table right now. But is Draymond Green not in a weird way good for brand? Is he just sort of like, how many people that are not basketball fans are familiar with, because it's almost like nothing works unless you can't have just the, I come from this WWE background. Go ahead, give me thank you very much for the drop. But the WWE world, where it doesn't work if you have nothing but good guys, you need the villainous factor, right? Like, I get it.
Draymond is a villain even if he's not punching players on the court, though. That's the thing.
There's
a line.
Crossed the line, but I do think that even crossing that line, there's also weird value that he brings to the NBA as a brand.
I'll tell you what, when Draymond Green returns from his suspension, that better be a nationally televised game.
Yeah, and no matter where he's at, it'll be sold out.
Yes.
Right? And it's going to be must-watch TV. And again, it'll cross over into NPR or CNN or the networks that aren't
what will he do
exclusive,
next?
which does nothing more than shine a light on your product, which is the NBA, which at the end of the day is just you want eyeballs, which results in sponsors, which results in money. So when you really boil it down, Draymond Green is not necessarily bad for revenue, but actually is probably very good for what it is that the bottom line is for the suits that run these things.
Yeah. I want to go back to the phones here in just a minute. Steel Toe will get to you before we go to break in about 5 minutes, but I wanted to quickly ask you, we're talking about Draymond's return and how hyped up that game will be. How long do you think he misses?
I have no idea.
It's got to be, he's not back this month.
No.
Earliest is January,
me ask you this.
Right?
How about this? How about if I give you a number? Because I heard this bannered about 20-plus games. Could you go there?
If I'm taking the over-under on 20, I think I'm taking the under. But I think it's 15.
Which we can't do the math in front of us, but how long is that?
Let's see. I can Give me a second to count up here really quick.
You're talking multiple months, right? Well, month and a half?
15 games he's already missed one. So he would return
almost
on the
months.
16th game, which would be Saturday, the 13th of January.
Oh.
So that's a month.
A month. Okay.
Almost exactly a month. He last played Phoenix on December 12th. He would return on the 13th of January.
Yeah, what was I thinking? Yeah, about a month. Yeah, that sounds about right.
15. I mean, that's a hefty suspension still. 15 games?
What is it? What do you think the NBA, obviously he's got to do some things. And is it just checking boxes and then coming in for another interview?
It's what Ja Morant did, right?
Morant was, 25 games?
Yeah, he's about to come back.
He's in Ja Morant territory. Because why did Ja Morant get what it is that he got, the 25 games? Yes, it was egregious, but it was also a repeat offender.
Yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised. Somebody put 20 to 25 and it's like, you're out of your mind. But the more I gnaw on that bone, I could see it.
Well, let's see. I have it here on my notes. The trade deadline is February 8th. There are 26 games before the trade deadline.
Wow.
He's back before the trade deadline, in my opinion.
I would think so.
And the Warriors are going to... I mean, but then the other question becomes how... If the Warriors are 500 without Draymond Green, the logic would tell you they're going to be better with Draymond Green. Is 500 enough to convince Mike Dunleavy and Steve Kerr and Joe Lacob that this is a team worth investing in or continue investing in before the deadline?
Oh, if
do you need to see Draymond back?
You'll take those. They're sub 500 right now. 500 is an upgrade. If you're upgrading without Draymond Green, you'll take that in a heartbeat. Because that means, again, you're within striking distance of getting to the postseason or that playing game or catching New Orleans, Phoenix, or or the Lakers that are in front of you. And that's all you want with Draymond coming back. 500 you'd take.
Probably.
I think it's the sub 500. Just how far can we go here? Like, can we afford to go 10 games under 500?
Probably not.
So
that's too much. Yeah. All right, let's go back to the phones here before we take a quick break. Up next is Steel Toe in San Mateo. What's up, Steel Toe? You're on Warriors This Week with Grandy and Dan Devone. How you doing today?
Good morning, Dan and Grandy. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I think that the Warriors actually going to get better because of the like you guys said with Podziemski. It's I think we finally realized that in order to really maximize Steve Kerr's offense and the Stephen Curry effect is they need more ball handlers like Podziemski or like what we had last year, Dante DiVincenzo. It's actually the problem was really Wiggins, who doesn't know how to dribble and doesn't know how to pass. And it hurt even more when he couldn't shoot or defend, when that's really what we extended the contract for, was shooting and defending. When he couldn't do that, I know it's a stretch. I almost think it's Wiggins' fault Draymond got suspended because he frustrated Draymond. I wanted to just pop Wiggins for coming in here out of shape and not living up to the contract. If he just did his part, what he did last year, the championship year, I think Draymond would have never got suspended and gotten frustrated losing close games.
Yeah, I don't know, Steel Toe. I mean, I get your point. Wiggins' struggles has been one of the main reasons why the Warriors have struggled, and it's been a cause of frustration. But I think we're getting to this point, once again, where we talk about Draymond's issues and blame it on Bob Myers not being here. Blame it on Andrew Wiggins' struggles. At some point, it hasn't really happened to this point, and maybe, as Dan says, it's a reason why it continues to happen. Draymond needs to be held accountable, and he's being held accountable. Will it change him? Who knows? Probably not. It's who he is. But I think we've got to hold him accountable, and blaming Andrew Wiggins' on-court struggles for Draymond Green's on-court transgressions just doesn't quite do it for me. All right, time for a break here on Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game. We got more coming up. We're halfway done, an hour and a half to go. It's Dan Devone and Mark Grandy with you. More Warriors This Week next on 95.7 The Game.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising! After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
It wasn't the internet, and it wasn't the warehouse club.
But?
It was video only. They had better deals on the Samsung, LG, and the Sony TVs that got the highest scores.
Better than online and at the club?
I know! Video only beat them all. And now we can afford an even better model for the same price. My research really paid off.
If we buy it video only.
Exactly. Otherwise, we'll be sorry.
At Video Only, you won't find huge stores with refrigerators or microwaves, but you will find the best deals on top-rated TVs, soundbars, and monitors. Shop around. Just make sure you visit Video Only, because if you don't,
you'll be sorry.
In Mountain View, San Mateo, Union City, Dublin, and San Rafael. Video Only.
Holiday stories from Shane Company customers.
It's our first Christmas together, and I wanted to get her something special. That's why I went to Shane Company. They had so many great gifts to choose from. It was a toss-up between hoop earrings and an emerald bracelet. So I got both, one for under the tree and one for her stocking.
Shop holiday gifts in every price range. Fine jewelry crafted with care and made to last a lifetime. 'Tis the season to shine. Shane Company. Fine jewelry since 1929.
The Prophetic Matrix. Unlock the secret code to your destiny. A new revolutionary book by Michael John Toste. The first ebook to make history by being filmed in space. Discover your unlimited future. Get The Prophetic Matrix now on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
With so many mesothelioma lawyers, how do you choose the right firm for you and your family? I'm John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan, and here's my advice to you. Do your research. Results matter. Reputation matters. Last year alone, our team recovered over $1 billion for our clients. If you've been diagnosed with mesothelioma, call us now, as the time to file a claim may be limited.
Call 800-602-2200. That's 800-602-2200. Call now.
He's the best in the biz.
The jumper's up. Good! .2 to go! Klay Thompson with the bucket!
Tim Roy's Call of the Game is presented by the Xfinity 10G Network, the best way to stream live sports.
'Twas almost the holidays, and all over the state, not a creature was stirring, except for, well, Nate. He was panicked, in need of a really good gift. Nate's a procrastinator, if you catch my drift. So off he dashed to the closest store, and there found holiday scratchers galore. Now Nate won't get a lump of coal, unless he burns the holiday casserole. Yes, scratchers from the California Lottery are great, especially for Mr. Procrastinate. So when it's time to get your gift shopping out of the way, try scratchers. A little play can make your day. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase player claim.
Wendy's Peppermint Frosty and Frosty Cream Cold Brew make the...
About 25 games away from now in early February. What do the Warriors do moving forward there? Big part of that decision, Dan, as we reset here, is the future of Klay Thompson, because he is on the last year of his contract. It's no secret he's had a very frustrating season, both for himself and for Warriors fans. There's been a number of Warrior fans out there who have wanted to see less of Klay Thompson, inject Moses Moody, Brandon Podziemski into the starting lineup for Klay Thompson. That's obviously a very emotional decision for Steve Kerr to have to even consider, to think about potentially making. The good news is Klay Thompson had a very good game on Thursday, 30 points, 8 of 12 from the three-point line. He has had some good shooting games this season, But I think from a decision-making standpoint, making the right basketball play, passing to Kevon Looney on the roll, making the right play time and time again, I felt like it was his best game of the season. Does that mean I think he's going to be the Klay Thompson of old consistently moving forward? No, not necessarily. Certainly a step in the right direction for Klay Thompson. And you can understand why this season has been difficult for him because he has the questions of his future with this team hanging over him. He's on the last year of his deal. The Warriors reportedly tried to get him a fresh new deal this offseason. It didn't quite work out, and now he's not only dealing with his on-court issues, the Warriors' struggles to win games, but he's got to think about his future as well, and there's a lot running through his mind, you can tell every single time he's out there on the floor.
Yeah, so Shams Charania came up with that story this past week that there was an offer on the table of $48 million over 2 years for an extension for one Klay Thompson. I think that's market value. I know that had to be somewhat of a slap in the face, especially after Draymond gets the 4 for 100, and that's nearly losing 50% of what it is that you're making currently at $43 million a year. But that, to me, that's for the Warriors. That makes business sense. Now, apparently, he rejected the offer, and then I think the Golden State Warriors pulled it subsequently. So you don't know the relationship between the two, but it does sort of change the narrative because a lot of people felt as though the Warriors were doing him wrong and the Golden State Warriors had not extended an offer altogether. As it turns out, they did, and the ball was in the court of Klay Thompson, and he decided to pass. But when you think about where he's at right now in his career and you think about the big three, he's clearly the one that, to me, as far as productivity, there's a high sort of there's a lot of question around where he's at right now, and the level of inconsistency. And while we highlight what he did against Los Angeles, why is it that has to be a game with an asterisk? Why is it that that's a game that we circle? Because he worked within the flow of the offense and he made the right reads. At this point in his career, shouldn't he be doing that every game? Like he'll have that game against the Clippers, and I don't know what he'll do against Brooklyn, but there's a good chance that he won't shoot it well. And then he'll start hunting shots, and he'll be completely out of whack. And there's just not that – what it is that he did was not necessarily brain surgery as far as working within the flow of the offense. The pick and roll to Kevon Looney, making sure that, he passes up a bad shot for a good one, getting into your mid-range, and incorporating everything that Steve Kerr said that was such a well-played game. Steve Kerr doesn't have to make those sort of proclamations following a game by that of Steph Curry. No, it's just baked in at this point in your career. If you're a future Hall of Famer, same with Draymond Green. That's just what's expected out of you. But for whatever reason, that's not the level of expectations for a Draymond Green. In fact, for a Klay Thompson, it's almost sort of the outlier now if he plays as well as he did the other night. To me, that's troublesome. That is not something that should be sort of just baked in that we can expect. Maybe not the 30 points, but similar play at this level, and especially at this age.
Yeah, you referenced Steve Kerr kind of raving about Klay Thompson's performance on Thursday against the Clippers. Steve Kerr joined Willard and Dibbs yesterday. He was asked about Klay Thompson's game and if just simply making shots, 8 of 12 from deep, scored 30 points. How good of a sign is that for Klay moving forward? And Steve Kerr talked about more than just the shooting, kind of what you're talking about, Dan.
I thought last night was bigger than that. He's had games where he's made shots. What made last night impressive was that he made the right play over and over and over again. How many times did he hit Looney or Dario, on rolls or pops when the Clippers sent 2 at him? He just kept making the right decision. And to me, that's the whole key for Klay offensively. If he's making the right decision, then he's going to shoot the ball well. Last night he was 8 for 12, and he had 5 assists. Multiple other passes that didn't lead to assists because shots were missed. But if he makes the right play, and then his shot will be consistent. And that's what I saw last night, and hopefully that's the norm going forward.
That's kind of what you're talking about.
Why is that noteworthy? Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, it's because it's been a terrible season for Klay, right?
But it's been sort of a terrible couple of years because a lot of what it is that he said, Steve Kerr feels as though he needs to highlight because you don't see it that frequently. And my question to you and to anybody else out there, including Klay Thompson, is why don't we? Is it because physically he's just, he can't perform at the level of consistency he did prior to the injuries? Or is he just a guy that, this is where he's at in his career, that he'll go back to hunting shots and wanting to put up 37 and a quarter, that it's all about him? Whereas, Steve Kerr should not feel as though that it's worth noting that he had a game where he was getting other guys involved.
It's just, I understand exactly where you're coming from. It makes total sense. Like, that should be the norm. It should be what you expect of a guy who's 33 years old and has been on championship teams his entire career and has gone to the playoffs almost every single year. That, in fact, I think, except for his, rookie second year, has been to the playoffs every year that he hasn't been injured. He goes to the playoffs. Like, that's just what Klay Thompson does. So the expectation should maybe be a little bit higher for him at this point. But I would also argue with you, it's kind of always been Klay's game, right? Even when in the middle of the Warriors' runs, when this team was winning championships or going to the championship, going to the finals, but losing to the Cavs or losing to the Raptors or whatever, it's still who kind of Klay was night in and night out, right? You always kind of shake your head like, should have taken that one, Klay. Like, Curry was open in the corner. Draymond Green at the free throw line. You get a quick 3-on-2. Draymond Green makes the right pass, and you get an easy bucket. Like, Klay, calm down just a little bit. I know you can get in one of these modes, and you can't miss. It's kind of always who he's been, though, hasn't it?
Fair enough, but you have to evolve, because you could also say that to a lesser degree the same thing about Steph when they were younger basketball players. If you're going to be one of the greatest to ever do it, if not the greatest shooter, and as you mentioned, the 4 championships and all the playoffs, you have to mature as a basketball player. You cannot be the same guy at age 25, at age 33, however old he is right now. There's been clearly an evolution on the part of Steph Curry. And you could see, you talked about James Harden and his game, and I'll be the last guy in the room to, throw any roses James Harden's way, but there's a weird evolution with this guy. His game right now, what we saw against the Golden State Warriors, where he's willing to distribute the basketball, get other guys involved, that he's not just all about getting to the rim and getting to the free throw line, that he's actually passing out of that. I mean, there's an evolution to James Harden's game that maybe it started in Philadelphia where he led the league in assists. And I just use him as an example that if that's the excuse for Klay Thompson, that I'm still this guy at age 26, now that I'm in my 30s, and also that I would also argue that the margin for error now is so much more thinner because there is no Kevin Durant. You don't have your splash brother Steph Curry now at now in his mid-30s as opposed to being in his late 20s. You guys are much older, and with that, the margin of error being is that you're not the same guy, nor is the team as athletic and or as good. Everybody's lost a half step, not a step. So if he's going to live within that shallow lens that, hey, this is my world and I've always done it this way, then that's on him. I think there needs to be a little bit more growth and evolution as far as his game. Yeah, to your point, to my point, I guess.
Especially if his shot isn't falling, he's going to have to be effective some other way, and he's not used to having to try to find a different way because he's one of the greatest shooters of the ball in NBA history. And I'm keeping an eye on the YouTube chat, youtube.com/957thegame. Dawn Data 1200. I see you talking about Klay's stats recently. I have up in front of me his basketball reference game log. Over the last 10 games, Klay Thompson is averaging just a tick under 19 points. He's shooting 41% from the field and 39.8% from three. Klay's shooting nearly 40% from three the last 10 games. He has been better shooting the ball lately. It hasn't always resulted in Warriors wins. In fact, they've lost more than they've won during these 10 games. The 10 games that he's played in, the Warriors are 4-6 in those 10. Are the Klay Thompson struggles exaggerated? Is maybe the shooting struggles are exaggerated, but something that you're talking about maybe is he's just not consistently making the right basketball decision every time down the floor. But you look at some of the raw numbers, and it almost doesn't match up with what you think or what you see from Klay Thompson night in and night out, because the shooting numbers aren't all that bad recently for Klay.
And the bar is so high, right, when it comes to this guy.
Yeah.
But I think it's very similar to a year ago. Let's remember where we were at last year, where he had that bad start, And everybody,
January or February, he led the league in threes.
Months, he was out of control. It was his most productive, and it started sort of around now in mid-December. So
it was like the best month of his career,
exactly,
shooting-wise.
And that's saying a lot. And I think that it's very similar to this year. And you hope that that's the blueprint going forward. But the question then becomes, can you afford a guy to get off to a start like this? Can you afford to get into sub 500 and to have these discussions of benching him? And let's not forget, as good as he was in January and February and part of December as well, he wasn't very good in the playoffs. And he sort of reverted back to the guy who sort of disappeared like he was in the beginning of the season. So while he was so good a year ago and this year seems to be trending in that direction, and yes, I think the numbers will tick up, what you're looking for is that consistency, which he hasn't provided.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, and this is something we talked about very early, and you can give us a call. What do you think about Klay Thompson's performance so far this season, and what does his future hold? 888-957-9570, where I think Klay Thompson has lost the most from his game, whether it's because of the injuries or just simply getting up there in age, it's on the other end of the floor.
No doubt.
You can talk about the shot being inconsistent. I'd argue he's always been a streaky shooter, always. Even when he was at his best, he's had incredible nights followed by some duds. That's just kind of what Klay Thompson was. But he's no longer the elite perimeter defender that he once was. I mean, he's
not a two-way player.
He was the best two-way player in the league, you could argue. Offensively, hitting threes, the best 3-and-D in the league during his prime, and it wasn't even particularly close. He was great at that for the Golden State Warriors. He's not that way defensively anymore, and it brings me back to the lineup change for the Golden State Warriors with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson and Brandon Podziemski. Without Draymond Green, how is this team going to stop anyone, Dan? It's my concern. Even if Klay scores 30 a night, moving forward for the Warriors, and he's 8 of 12 from downtown, and you get 25 from Steph Curry every single night like you're going to, because that's just what he does. You get 12 from Kuminga, and you get 8 from Moody off the bench, and Chris Paul hits a couple of threes. Like, they're going to give up 125 a night. They're not going to be able to slow anyone down.
Well, I don't know if the game against the Clippers was an isolated start for Brandon Podziemski, because
Steve Kerr did say he's going to give this lineup at least a few games. He wants to give them a stretch to see what they're made of. Who knows how long that stretch is, but
because the problem with Podziemski, as good as he is, and he deserves all the run he's getting, is that you get smaller. And to your point, it's not only the defense. The defense on the perimeter isn't as much of a problem, but it's how do you match up with bigs inside? How do you match up with the 4s and the 5s that just about every other team has except the Golden State Warriors, or so it appears. I think that Brandon Podziemski deserves some run. And when you talk about the lineup change, let's say Draymond is healthy.
Okay.
Kevon Looney's obviously good to go. Are you done with that starting lineup? Have you reached to the point where Draymond and Kevon Looney, we talked about that margin error has been reduced. These guys are no longer the same athletes. Can you still roll out that starting 5 with Klay, Dre, Steph, Wiggins, and then Draymond Green and Kevon Looney? Because I don't think those two can be on the floor anymore.
It's difficult because you're sacrificing so much spacing and room on the offensive end. And Draymond's actually been shooting fine this year, especially from deep. Like as good as he ever has in his career from downtown. But you're sacrificing so much in terms of your versatility offensively. And I think quietly, Kevon Looney has had a really rough season for the Warriors. And, you can kind of sweep it under the rug because sometimes he'll just play like 14 minutes a night. He starts, he gets 8 minutes in the first quarter and doesn't play much the rest of the game. Rarely closes. He closed on Thursday down in Los Angeles against the Clippers, kind of interestingly enough, and that was because the Clippers were getting everything they wanted down low. I imagine Steve Kerr wanted someone to check Zubats or Daniel Tice when he was in the game. And without Draymond Green, who are you going to put on him? Kuminga? Do you trust Dario Saric to defend Zubats down low? Like, Saric can't even defend someone his size, let alone someone 4 or 5 inches taller than him. So the Warriors are really out of options in terms of, you're right, interior defense, which maybe that means you get an uptick in Kevon Looney minutes, but those two together, I'm with you. The offense is just so difficult to come by. It scrunches things up and makes things that much more difficult for your perimeter guys. You feel like anytime you have Steph and Klay on the floor together, you should have oodles of space out there, but when you have Draymond Green and Kevon Looney together, and then an Andrew Wiggins who isn't shooting well from outside, you're asking Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson to do an incredibly difficult thing, is find space when all of the defenders are sagging off and leaning your way.
Yeah, you nailed it. With Andrew Wiggins not shooting well, and I would throw Klay Thompson in that category at times, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
That fourth quarter on Thursday was ugly.
It made sense like 2 years ago. I know coaches, especially Steve Kerr, you just get stubborn, right? We win this way. This is the way we do it. But he's slow to sort of, embrace the kids and Podziemski, and I'd like to see Trace Jackson Davis get some more run. But there's no way in hell you can roll out that starting lineup anymore. Not with Andrew Wiggins not scoring, and not with Klay Thompson disappearing every other game. This isn't 2 years ago. It's certainly not 5 years ago where you can that's okay. We got three dynamic scorers, and what Draymond and Kevon Looney provide for the team on the defensive end and in other areas, this is a winning formula. This isn't 2 years ago, and it's certainly not last year. So the idea of putting two players that are non-scorers with Andrew Wiggins, who's turned himself into a non-scorer, and Klay Thompson, who can be a non-scorer depending on what night, you don't have to have a high basketball IQ to recognize that ain't going to work.
Okay, so let's imagine Draymond Green is available and he's ready to go after the suspension or whatever the case is, whenever the time comes. What starting five should the Warriors run out there?
Well, that's
on
where
a
it
given
gets
night?
Interesting. I'll throw it back on you. Is Jonathan Kuminga in that starting lineup when he returns?
In an ideal world, and this, I know you used that phrase earlier, this is not an ideal world. In an ideal world, Andrew Wiggins figures it out and you feel comfortable putting him back in the starting lineup. He becomes the player that was your second best player on a championship team 2 years ago. He becomes that player again. And you start Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green. And I would be tempted to go to Jonathan Kuminga in the starting lineup. Go small, embrace what has worked for you in the past. You can do that more so when you have Draymond Green because he is still a really good defender and he maybe your best chance at limiting some of the other big guys in the NBA. Like, if you're playing Nikola Jokic, Draymond Green's your best bet against him.
No.
Still.
You're 100%.
Right,
absolutely.
So if you have Draymond Green available, I think you go for a little bit more of the dynamic youth, energy, speed, athleticism from Jonathan Kuminga. And hell, maybe in crunch times in certain moments, if Kuminga's having an issue or Draymond Green is having a poor game or if Wiggins is struggling, you could throw Moses Moody in there as well. I think there's plenty of room for this Warriors team, maybe not as your normal, consistent, most used lineup. I think there's room for Moses Moody to be a small ball four. I think Moses Moody could do that for the Golden State Warriors. Now, if you're going up against larger teams, that's going to be a struggle defensively. But, how long has Steve Kerr been talking about, I need to find more minutes for Moses Moody, right? It was a couple of weeks ago, that game in Sacramento, where Moody was out of the rotation pregame, and Kerr came to him and said, hey, you're not going to play tonight unless something happens. And then there were two injuries, and the Warriors could not do anything in the second half, and Kerr said, you know what, I'm going to play him. He played him, and he was great, and then he got subbed out in crunch time. And Steve Kerr kind of faced a lot of criticism for that, and since has said he is going to be a consistent part of the rotation, and I need to find more minutes for him. I think there's room for Moses Moody small ball 4 minutes. In addition, obviously, to Kuminga 4 minutes. That's his normal position. Steve Kerr sees him as more of a 4 than a 3. Jonathan Kuminga, that is. So I think there's room for the Warriors to maybe explore these small ball lineups that features their youngsters on the front line as opposed to someone like Kevon Looney.
So you can see wherein lies the potential for a Warrior trade. Because think about what it is that we're discussing right now. We can go back and forth, and I sort of agree with you with Jonathan Kuminga, but I don't think either one of us feel all that secure about it.
No.
But that's where the Warriors are at because those are your options.
You don't have a home run option anymore.
But, which is why you have to seriously entertain a trade. So if Jonathan Kuminga is dealt along, because you got to give up Chris Paul, you got to give up something to get something, and a couple or maybe an unprotected pick. And now I plug in, just for the sake of this conversation, it may take more, but if I'm plugging in Pascal Siakam, now, or I'll let you fill in a name, but now it begins to make sense. Now at least on paper, that looks like a relevant basketball team, as opposed to us trying to shoehorn somebody in at that 4 spot or the 5th starter, if you will. So do you see where I'm going with this? Where the trade begins to sort of become larger and larger as we get to the deadline, because it's becoming more and more apparent that that's what they need. If you can't go with Kevon Looney and Draymond Green, which I think we're both in agreement you can't, so then what is that other piece? Is it Jonathan Kuminga? I'm not there necessarily. So then the idea of packaging him and whoever it is that you have that can entice somebody that's going to play at that 4 spot that you feel good about might be where the Warriors are at.
How do the Warriors, Pascal Siakam has been like the name Warrior fans on Twitter have been pointing out for like 3 years now, right? You need to match salaries and you need to give the Raptors something worthwhile.
I want to say he's like 35, 38.
I'm going to look it up right now, but something worthwhile would have to be, you would think, at least one of Kuminga and Moody and a first-round pick.
Yes.
If not more, 2 first-round picks, plus the contract, which is Chris Paul or Klay Thompson. That's what it is. Is that worth it? Do you want to give up on Kuminga and or Moody and a first-round pick, which, who knows, might be a pretty good first-round pick if things continue down this road for the Warriors? You already don't have your first-round pick coming up this year. That's in the hands of the Portland Trail Blazers. It was part of the Drew Holiday and Damian Lillard trade that sent Drew Holiday to the Celtics. Are you willing to do that to take a swing at Pascal Siakam, who would undoubtedly, I agree, make this team much better? But is it worth giving up on a young piece, future young pieces, and then, of course, a rotation piece who's making a ton of money in likely Chris Paul? Is that worth it?
You have to give up something, as I mentioned, to get something. So if you're asking me, let's just say for the sake of this conversation, we're both GMs here, right? I'm rocking a $5,000 Armani suit, and you're still going with the hoodie, which is why you're more an effective GM than I am. I'm all about show. If you're going to put on the table right now that I can have Pascal Siakam, but I've got to give up Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and a pick in Chris Paul. Is that what you're offering?
If I'm the Warriors, I don't think I do it.
Okay. Is it because of Moody or is it because of what's?
It's the combination of both of them.
So it's okay. So
I would consider it with one
Jonathan Kuminga, Chris Paul, and a pick.
Yes. I think you.
But I don't think that's enough to get Siakam.
Probably not. But your starting lineup at that point would be Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. You could start Pascal Siakam at the 3 or the 4, Draymond Green, Kevon Looney, or maybe you start Podziemski and you go smaller in the front line. Maybe Wiggins figures it out. You have Wiggins at the 3, Siakam at the 4, Draymond at the 5. That becomes a team.
Yeah.
A lot of it hinges on Wiggins figuring things out, but that becomes a team that's a really good basketball. That's a really good starting 5. Really good.
They got it. They have got to my point. You have to seriously entertain the trade, and you want to do it. You have to do it sooner rather than later. In other words, if this goes from bad to worse, as we initially discussed, without Draymond Green, and you're still within striking distance, 2.5 games from the play-in spot, as you're behind New Orleans and Phoenix and the Los Angeles Lakers, if you can be in this similar situation when he comes back month, 3 weeks from now, you're in a good situation. You can still make that trade and have things make sense. But if you suddenly now fall 5, 6, 7, 8 games back, well then, no, because now you have to reevaluate everything. So that trade, the timing on that trade
hinges on how they perform here.
Yes. And the next 3 weeks for the maybe the next month is really everything for the Golden State Warriors when you think about this year.
Yeah. Yeah, so Chris Paul is making about $31 million this season. Pascal Siakam is in the final year of his deal, $37.9. Wow. So the Warriors, again, would need to attach a little bit more money, and that's where Jonathan Kuminga would come in. You add in Kuminga's $6 million, that's $37 million. Chris Paul and Jonathan Kuminga, Pascal Siakam is making $37.9. So you can get the numbers close to matching up there. Warriors might need to add in something other small to make it work. But then you get to the Raptors side of things, and I don't think Kuminga, Chris Paul, and 1 first-round pick is enough. So the Warriors are kind of stuck in this situation where do they want to emphasize? Do they want to emphasize trying to win one more this year? Are they even good enough, even with Siakam, to do that? Or do they want to maybe begin thinking about preparing for what's ahead? It's a really tough situation for the Warriors, and there's really no easy answers. A lot of it hinges on the next 15 to 20 games, and we can talk about that coming up on the other side. What do the Warriors need to show coming up without Draymond Green in order to give this run, this team, one more legit chance at a postseason run? All right, more coming up on the other side. We'll also get to you, Doug and Austin. I see you on hold. That's coming up on the other side as Warriors This Week rolls on. It's Dan Devone and Mark Grandy with you here on 95.7 The Game.
This holiday season, find all kinds of deals at Target. Discover sweet deals on toys and small appliances, big deals on clothing and beauty, plus so much more. At Target, get what you need for the holidays. Find new deals each week for everyone on your list and get it all fast with free drive up. Score low prices and great deals all season long. Now at Target. Exclusions apply.
Love like this before.
Enter to win a $100 gift card to Pacific Catch and experience a celebration, including seasonal shellfish, specials like Dungeness crab, and creamy clam chowder, guaranteed to give you those warm winter vibes. For your chance to win, visit the contest page at 957thegame.com.
Television sales on Black Friday set new records as millions of Americans snapped up the hot deals. But a lot of people were out of town or too busy to take advantage of the special pricing. So, how about a redo? Right now, you've got a second chance to save big on many of the top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs. Where? At Video Only, where the smart shoppers go. So, don't miss out. Check out Video Only now, or
you'll be sorry.
This year, Staples wants everyone to have a happy Holla deal. That's right, Holla Deal. Staples Holla Deals are amazing savings on hot holiday tech. Great prices on laptops, game systems, earbuds, and more. And now at Staples, you can save...
offer is off the table. What does his future look like? The Warriors have decisions coming up at the trade deadline. Are they going to think about trying to improve this team moving forward? How well do they need to play in this stretch without Draymond Green to maybe earn themselves a move or two to help them out? Or are they just going to kind of stand pat? We will see, and we'll break it all down as we continue here on Warriors This Week. But let's first go to Austin in San Jose. Austin, you're on Warriors This Week with Grandy and Devone. What you thinking, Austin?
Hey, fellas, good conversation. Joy, as always. Very good. Listen, a couple thoughts. One, I remember you just said a couple if and whens, if this happens, when this happens. I think that's part of the problem. We can't if you look at the standings, I did it this morning. I mean, if you look at where the Warriors are, I think they're around 11th or something. You're talking about them having to leap over a lot of teams to even get to a 6th spot or even an 8th spot at this point. So I want to be realistic about this year. I don't think we should be making moves just for this year. I think we got to look at next year and the year beyond. So I'm more in favor of looking at long term, saying that we do have to make some moves at trade deadline. I think that if I were GM, I would look to move Draymond or Wiggins. I would bring in a big, maybe Pascal Siakam, but I'm also thinking someone like Lauri Markkanen, someone like Jalen Duren from Detroit. You got to look at guys that are younger who can impact the roster and know how to play basketball. So I'd like to keep Podziemski and Kuminga if possible, but if I have to move Kuminga to get one of those bigs, you may have to consider that. But I do think you got to think beyond just this year, because I think realistically this year is probably not going to happen. The Warriors are not going to make a championship run this year. So what's going to happen the next 2 or 3 years? And we can turn this around, guys. We don't have to live in purgatory forever. So that's my thoughts. Talk to you guys later.
Appreciate the call, Austin. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to join the conversation, 888-957-9570. I think the names that Austin threw out there,
I like him.
Pascal Siakam, Lauri Markkanen. I love Lauri Markkanen. He would be incredible on this Warriors team. That would be awesome.
You know what Danny Ainge is going to ask to get Lauri Markkanen?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to Austin is, Draymond Green is not getting you Lauri Markkanen. And Pascal Siakam is on the last year of his current deal. And given that you're relatively hamstrung contract-wise, I'm not so sure that you are going to sign him long-term after this year either. So I don't think the Warriors don't have this home run option where even if there was a younger star who's fed up with his current situation and wants out, and the Warriors are there for the taking, like the situation just isn't really there for the Warriors. There isn't an easy answer. And all the names that Austin threw out, I agree with. They would be great on the Warriors. Jalen Duren, the big man who's currently starting ahead of James Wiseman for the Detroit Pistons when he's been healthy, I think he has a future in this league. Jalen Duren's a very, very interesting player and an intriguing player to keep an eye on. The Warriors don't have the pieces to go get one of those guys.
No, they don't. And I think you have to live in sort of that reality. To his other point that the Warriors should start thinking about next year and years beyond, that might be something that they're going to have to grapple with again if things go awry in this next 3 weeks to a month, which is why I continue to reiterate, with the absence of Draymond Green and you're already 2.5 games out of the playing game, if this thing goes from bad to worse and you're now 7-8 games out, when Draymond returns, then yeah, you are looking at a future. And you may be looking at the beginning of the end of the foundation, that being the core. So again, I've been harping on this all morning long. The next 3 weeks for Warrior fans, Dub Nation, this is everything. If you can stay afloat and tread water, and again, still be within 3 games of that play-in spot, and here comes Draymond Green, well, there's definitely an opportunity of rectifying this basketball season. But if you fall and this thing gets ugly, and there's the strong potential that could happen, then the Golden State Warriors are looking to blow it up and rebuild, to the caller's point.
I have a question for you. The Draymond Green issues, the on-court antics, if you want to call them that, leading to his unavailability for long stretches this season. He's already been suspended for 6 games, and that will continue. It'll get into double digits. Who knows how long it lasts? I think you and I both think this suspension will be double digits alone. You're looking at 10-plus games in this stretch alone. Where does Steph Curry fall in all of this conversation? Not like, obviously, his future. His future is secure with the Golden State Warriors. How does he feel about this, and what is he encouraging leadership to do? Is Stephen Curry at a point where he's thinking about life without Draymond Green? Is he fed up with this? Is he wondering about Klay Thompson's long-term viability? Is he encouraging the Warriors to move on from Kuminga or Moody to get someone younger but who is still proven in this league? It oftentimes feels like, from the outside looking in, that Steph Curry is just like, go with the flow, like, I'm going to do me. I'm great. I love Klay. I love Draymond. I want to be with these guys moving forward. Does he ever get to a point where he gets frustrated enough? And we've seen it on the court. He's been frustrated a lot this season. He was frustrated, what was it, the game in Oklahoma City? No, in Phoenix, when Draymond got ejected from that game. He was on the bench imploring his teammates, like screaming at him, can we get a stop? Like, come on. Let's do something here. We got to try something different. Can we put some effort together? Does he ever get to a point, Dan, where he gets frustrated enough with the current state of this team, and he goes to Mike Dunleavy Jr. and Joe Lacob and says, hey, we got to do this, because otherwise I'm upset, and Steph Curry is going to get what Steph Curry wants for the most part moving forward. Does he ever get to that point? Because it doesn't seem like he's been to that point.
Yeah, I don't know that he's that proactive where he would go to management and saying, this is what I need or this is where we need to go.
But they're definitely consulting him.
No doubt. No doubt. Everything goes through Steph. I'm a firm believer of that. Every move he's consulted and he's on board and very aware of what it is the Golden State Warriors are doing. So you raise a really interesting question. When it comes to breaking up the three, where is Steph with that? Obviously, we know the allegiance and the friendship that he has with all three of them, but especially when it comes to Draymond Green. And if say you're Levy, say you're Jacob, say you're Steve Kerr, and while you'll take that into account, but you have to do what is best for the organization. Let's not forget that they also wanted Bradley Beal at one point.
Over Gary Payton.
Or Steve. They wanted Avery Bradley. I'm sorry.
That's what I was
Bradley
thinking of.
Beal. They over Gary Payton. So sometimes you can listen to what it is they have to say, but sometimes you have to be the final ruling party at the end of the day in terms of making judgment that's best for the basketball team going forward. But it may reach a point where, Steph, you obviously still got enough in the tank. There's no way in hell we'll move off on you. You're still the centerpiece of this team for the foreseeable future. But we have to entertain moving off from Draymond Green, which I don't think is going to happen, because I do think that Draymond Green is still viable, and physically he still makes this a better basketball team. But at some point, the real conversation of, I know you're friends with Klay. I know you guys came up together, but I can have no emotional attachment. There's no sentimentality in the decisions I have to make this basketball team better. So that conversation could be in the near future. And it'll be interesting to see what it is that Steph says or reacts to when or if that does happen.
Well, that same conversation happened this offseason. And Steph Curry, I would imagine, I don't have any inside sources here, but Draymond Green signed a 4-year extension. We know that was with Steph Curry's blessing.
But I don't think that they did it because Steph said, hey.
No, they probably also thought it was their best course of action. But 6 months ago, Steph was like, please sign Draymond.
I see what you're saying. So, yeah.
So 6 months ago, he was on that side of the aisle. I mean, is this enough through this part of the season? 25 games into the season, 24 to be exact. Is that enough for Steph Curry to begin thinking about rethinking that decision?
No, because I think that while he frustrates Steph, I think we're both in agreement, he's still a good basketball player.
Yes, second best player on this team when he's been on the floor.
I would go as far as saying he's one of the top 10 defenders in the NBA currently. And he's
up there.
He's the reason why he got that contract. It's not because of anything else other than he's still a viable component to what it is that the Warriors want to do. And that's all that's the only lens by which that contract was drafted and or agreed on by both parties. I think that right now, yeah, it's frustrating for everybody, and there's a lot of emotion that maybe if decisions had to be made, they can get the better of you. But I think that, again, letting this breathe, he comes back. He's the good Draymond Green. They're going to go on a winning streak here because they've had one of the, if not the most difficult schedule. So they're going to play some sub-500 teams.
They have the easiest schedule remaining.
Which is going to mean a lot. That changes everything when you win a basketball game and you go on winning streaks. And if Draymond is playing well, the team is winning. This will soon, I know as big as it is right now, it will soon dissipate and get smaller in the rearview mirror. Much like that of Jordan Poole at the time. I was taking calls where everybody was like, that's it, get him out. Let him go. And even Draymond's very similar to what we're hearing right now. I need to take some time out. I got to do some introspection. Less than 6 months later, he's going WWE on Sabonis. So we've seen this before, and it's going to repeat itself, Grant. He's going to come back, and he'll play well. They'll win some games. It'll be forgotten. But when it gets to the playoffs and things get heated, don't be surprised if he hauls off on another two, because that's just who he is at this juncture.
So you don't think that this latest Draymond Green thing situation has changed anything?
No. For the here and now, for the foreseeable, the immediate future, yes, because
you're without him, obviously.
You're without him, but also when he comes back, he's not going to immediately, go back to cheap shotting guys or kicking guys in the junk or, going WWE on Rudy Gobert. He's going to behave. They'll win some games, but no, it's not changing anything as far as who he is as a person and the relationship he has with that basketball team. I don't think anything has changed. The only thing that'll change is that time will go by, and what happens just by, human nature, this will all dissipate, and the impact will be much less as a month or two goes by, and as we get into the season with Draymond Green back on this basketball team.
So Steve Kerr was on with Willard and Dibbs yesterday and was asked about the latest Draymond Green incident and the team dealing with all of this, and I thought he had some strong words about it. Here's Steve Kerr, the head coach of the Warriors, yesterday on with Willard and Dibbs.
Frankly, it's tiring. It's exhausting for our team to have to go through all this here in the early part of the season, multiple suspensions, and everybody on the team loves Draymond, and we care for him, we care about him. But part of the emotion and part of the exhaustion is just worrying about him and trying to make sure he's okay and trying to make sure he gets to the right place in all this. So you throw all that together, it's a lot. It's a lot for a team to have to handle.
So Kerr saying that this Draymond situation is, quote, tiring and exhausting for the team to handle.
He has to say that.
So that's not how they actually feel?
It's how he feels.
Or is it just that his on-court is enough to outweigh the exhaustion of dealing with this?
The latter. At the end of the day, it's about winning games. And while what it is, he says that there's some truth to it, but he's playing politician. He has to say that. He recognizes the sensitivity of this. He knows everyone's listening. Not only the public, but the NBA. He's got to say the right things. He's got to toe the line. He's got to read from the teleprompter, essentially. But I would also add, Steve Kerr, you're partly to blame for a lot of this. You created this beast. A lot of this could have been checked years ago, but you let him be him, and you have this relationship with the players that you give them this long leash, especially when it comes to Klay and when it comes to Steph and when it comes to turnovers, that, hey, listen, man, I'm not that sort of coach. That it's 2023, you can't be Bobby Knight, and I understand a lot of that, but he created a lot of this. But I don't believe, what'll happen, Grant, is only because we've seen this before. This is very similar. Maybe we can re-rack what it is he said after Jordan Poole went down, that, hey, this is a different level. I don't know where we go with him, and I'm paraphrasing here, but this is serious now, and it's hard to play with Draymond. We've been here before.
So much of what Steve Kerr said after the video leaked was about the sanctity of the locker room. You remember that?
Yes.
It wasn't even about the act of the punch itself. It was about, I can't believe the video leaked out.
And you know why I think...
And Draymond didn't even get suspended.
You know why I think part of that is? And this might be a bit of a reach on my end. I think it's because nobody liked Jordan Poole. Not that you want to see him get punched. He can't do that. But I think that he had really distanced himself. And now that we're beginning to see the real Jordan Poole out in Washington and the sort of spectacle he's become, I think that not that they wanted to give Draymond a pass. I mean, that was as vicious as it gets. But I think that there was this sense of there's the team and then there's Jordan Poole who's becoming this irritant. And you saw it play out with assistant coaches. You saw Steph go after him. I saw Steve Kerr chew him out. And I think that that's one of those where let's keep this in-house because in-house we know how we feel about this guy as opposed to if this gets leaked, it's just going to look like Draymond Green's viciously attacking another basketball player, which it was. But I also think that there was a subplot to that as well.
Certainly Draymond had to feel that way, and maybe he felt more strongly than everyone else did, but maybe there was kind of that undercurrent throughout the whole team as well. Let's go back to the phone lines here on Warriors This Week. Up next is Doug in Santa Clara. Doug, what's up? You're on Warriors This Week here on 95.7 The Game with Grandy and Dan Devone. How you doing, Doug? Doug, you there?
Jeff.
Oh, what's up, Doug?
I'm Jeff. Jeff.
Oh, Jeff. Jeff in Santa Clara?
You know what? I'm Jeff in Santa Clara.
Sorry about that. What's up, Jeff?
You know what? I'm going to defer. By the way, I had two twisted T's. I apologize. But I want to defer to two smart people. Do you think that Draymond Green actually makes intentional trouble or he can't control himself?
Good question, Jeff. Thanks for the call. I don't think... I think I somewhat believed Draymond when he said he didn't intend to hit Yusuf Nurkic in the face. Now, I think it's a little silly to think that you flail around like that, you're not going to connect with someone, but I think I buy that it wasn't intentional. I don't think he's purposefully going out there and trying to get himself ejected and suspended. I don't think he's on that kind of destructive behavior. But he gets in these modes where he kind of just loses sense of time and space, and he goes crazy for a minute or two. And he has to do better at controlling that. I don't think he's out there purposefully trying to hurt someone. Now, the Jordan Poole thing is different, but...
He goes right up to the edge, usually peeks over it, and then sometimes crosses that line. But this is who he is. And so there's the other conversation, Grant, that if you want him to change, do you get the same basketball player? Like if you're asking him...
that's been Steve Kerr's line for his whole career. Yeah, we would like Draymond to kind of reel it back in a little bit. We don't want to lose him, but if you tell Draymond to stop that, he's not going to have the fire and the tenacity and the ferocity that leads him to be one of the best players in this era of the NBA.
Which is why I don't think he's going to change. Which is why I don't think any of this is going to change, and why when he comes back, it's going to be basketball per usual. Right now, yes, it's Armageddon. It's the end of the world. The Warriors get rid of everybody. Draymond Green is never going to come back to the team. I understand where we're at from an emotional standpoint, but just give this some time. Let it breathe. He'll be back. The Warriors will win some games, and we're going to be playing Warrior basketball. We're going to be winning some games, and then Draymond essentially is going to be the same guy, even though he's been reprimanded and recognizes that maybe he can't go to that level, but it's still resonating in the back of his head.
What gives you the confidence that with him back, they're going to suddenly start winning games? Is it just that the schedule was difficult? Because when Draymond was there, it's not like this was a great basketball team even with him to start this season.
Well, I do think because well, you're right. Maybe I'm taking some liberties here. I think the schedule plays into their favor, and I do think that they're a substantially better basketball team when he's on the floor. And I also do think, and I might be on an island here, that you're going to see Andrew Wiggins return at some point. I mean, he can't be this bad for a full 82 games. This guy is, I don't know what you attribute it to. Initially, I was saying, well, he was injured over the off season, and it's responsible for sort of his slow start. He had that cartilage or rib issue.
24 games in now.
Yeah, we're getting a little late. We're getting ankle deep into the season. I recognize it, but I'm still going to hold out that Andrew Wiggins is going to be the Andrew Wiggins of old.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's sneak in one more call here before we hit a break. Up next is Mark in Millbrae. What's up, Mark? You're on Warriors This Week with Grandy and Devone. How you doing, Mark?
Yeah, what's up, guys? To me, obviously, Draymond's getting a lot of the headlines, but he's been playing well. To me, the bigger problem for this team right now is Klay's obviously not himself, and even bigger than that is Wiggins has been a complete dog. I guess once he got paid, he's going into cruise mode. He's really got to get his game going because he was supposed to take that mantle from Klay as Curry's number 2 guy, and he's been a complete and utter non-factor and complete bust. Obviously, Draymond, the spotlight's on him, and he's got to recognize the league has a spotlight on him. So even that hit on Nurkic was basically a flagrant 2. You're getting suspended for any little thing now. Going forward, he's really got to rein it in as much as he can and play with that physical mentality. But the Warriors are not going to go anywhere if Klay obviously is not the same guy. Wiggins is the main issue with this team right now. He's been a non-factor, and he's really got to step his game up, guys, because if he doesn't, the Warriors, I think, are going to be stuck in a rut here because the young guys like Kuminga or Moses Moody are solid, Podziemski, but they're not relied upon to be one of the main core guys. And I want to get your guys' opinion going forward with Klay really struggling. Is he going to read the room like his agent did, like Draymond did, who thought he was going to get the max, but he settled for the 400? Do you think Klay is going to check himself in the ego and come back in a bench role? I think he can be an elite 6 man going forward. Or do you think his ego is going to get in the way and his agent's going to think he's going to get a big payday and have to go to an awful team like Washington, Detroit? Because, guys, as much as I love Klay, a lot of Dub Nation does, he's not going to get a max, and to me, he's maybe a $15 million a year player at this point, and that's being generous. What are your thoughts on that? Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Mark. Appreciate you tuning into Warriors this week. I agree with you when you talk about Andrew Wiggins as the key for this team moving forward. If he starts to look like the Wiggins from that playoff run, this is an entirely different Warriors team because you get the two-way Wiggs. You get a player on offense and on defense that you've been missing this entire season. I think you're a little extreme there, Mark, when you talk about Klay that way. We can address that coming up on the other side. We've got one more segment left of Overtime here on 95.7 The Game. We got a couple other callers on hold. We'll get to you coming up on the other side. It's Dan Devone and Mark Randy with you. Warriors this week rolls along. 30 more minutes coming up next right here on 95.7 The Game.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
It wasn't the internet, and it wasn't the warehouse club.
But?
It was video only. They had better deals on the Samsung, LG, and the Sony TVs that got the highest scores.
Better than online and at the club?
I know. Video only beat them all. And now we can afford an even better model for the same price. My research really paid off.
If we buy it video only.
Exactly. Otherwise, we'll be sorry.
At Video Only, you won't find huge stores with refrigerators or microwaves, but you will find the best deals on top-rated TVs, soundbars, and monitors. Shop around. Just make sure you visit Video Only, because if you don't,
you'll be sorry.
In Mountain View, San Mateo, Union City, Dublin, and San Rafael. Video Only.
Still don't have the perfect holiday gift? At Shane Company, we have the largest selection of last-minute gifts in every price range. Gorgeous gold chains, diamond stud earrings, that special pendant they'll wear every day, and more. As your friend in the jewelry business, we offer our customers high-quality jewelry, the best warranty in the industry, and exceptional customer service. 'Tis the season to shine. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
Untuckit has everything he needs this holiday season. Shop now and save big with our biggest sale of the year happening at untuckit.com or at any of the 80-plus Untuckit stores. Untuckit shirts are designed to be worn untucked. They keep him looking sharp and feeling comfortable. He'll love to unwrap one of our iconic button-downs, super soft flannels, or cozy sweaters. Get them while they last during our biggest sale of the year. Shop Untuckit's biggest sale of the year happening now at untuckit.com or at any of our over 80 stores.
Wendy's Peppermint Frosty and Frosty Cream Cold Brew make the perfect gift for anyone in your life. Especially for you. Yeah, this year you're sitting on your own lap and getting yourself what you want. Finally. And if you need a little more pep in your step, get yourself a refreshing Peppermint Frosty Cream Cold Brew. Or you can give it to your mom. Whatever.
Limited time only at participating U.S. Wendy's. Vanilla Frosty is temporarily unavailable.
Dear Santa, I hope you are having a good day in the North Pole. Is it cold all the time there? Is that why your cheeks are so rosy? My mom says I'm a good helper. But you didn't come last year. Was my chimney broken? I just really hope this year when I wake up, I'm gonna see that you came to my house too. Wow.
Donate and help the Marines deliver hope to a child in need.
Honey, can you swing by the post office and grab some stamps?
Done.
And drop off these packages?
Sure thing, honey.
Ooh, and get the tracking info.
Got it.
But you haven't moved.
I know. How great is that?
This holiday season, the Postal Service is closer than ever with convenient ship-from-home services like label printing, free package pickup, and delivery notifications. You can send more holiday joy from the comfort of home. The United States Postal Service, delivering for America. Ship from home at USPS.com/holidayjoy.
Television sales on Black Friday set new records as millions of Americans snapped up the hot deals. But a lot of people were out of town or too busy to take advantage of the special pricing. So, how about a redo? Right now, you've got a second chance to save big on many of the top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs. Where? At Video Only, where the smart shoppers go. So, don't miss out. Check out Video Only now, or
you'll be sorry.
Some days I cover up because of my moderate.
One segment left. Mark Randy and Dan Devone with you. We're taking you up until noon. If you want to get in, give us a call. 888-957-9570. That's also the Comcast Business text line, and I'm keeping an eye on the conversation going on the YouTube chat, youtube.com/957thegame if you want to join in. Nick, I see you. Mark, Oakland Soldier, Adrian, Mickey D, Yo, I see you as well. A lot of people there on the YouTube chat, and it's been a good conversation there. I've been checking it out during the breaks here on 95.7 The Game. Appreciate you guys as always. Dan, I wanted to focus here on the last segment about the importance of these next 15 to 20-ish games for the Golden State Warriors, because right now you look at where the Warriors are. They're 10-14. They're on the outside looking in not just of the playoffs, but of the play-in. They're the 11th seed right now in the Western Conference. Phoenix at 13-12 is the last play-in team. You're 2.5 games behind them. Now you're playing without your best defensive player and kind of your on-court leader in Draymond Green. You're without Gary Payton II, who is probably your second best defensive player. He was reevaluated a couple of days ago, and he's beginning some light on-court individual work now. He'll be reevaluated again next week, probably on Thursday, for the Golden State Warriors. So you're looking at least the next couple of games, next few games, probably more than that, without Gary Payton II. You're 10-14. You're without your best defensive player, and now you're tasked with kind of staying in touch with the rest of the pack in the Western Conference. And I know the schedule gets easy, but there's just so much hinging on these next 15 to 20 games for the Golden State Warriors. It really feels like we could be looking at, if things go poorly, we could be looking at this Warriors team making major changes, and it's been something that's been bandied about and talked about for so long. When is this era of Warriors basketball going to end? I'm not saying I think it's the likeliest outcome that one of the big three is moved, but if things break a certain way, it's definitely going to be on the table.
I think you need to get ahead of that. I think that it's everything. And I've talked about this throughout the entire day, that the next 3 weeks to a month is just going to determine the season. It may determine the fate of the big three. It's going to determine the franchise in the foreseeable future. Because while you're 2.5 games out from the play-in game, should you struggle without Draymond, who is, as you have mentioned on numerous occasions, your second-best player, you could just see. Did you see the game against the Clippers where it's just an entirely different personality when you don't have Draymond out there? It's that old, you can't see it on a stat sheet. It's an immeasurable, it's an intangible, but it's what Draymond, it's the doggedness that Draymond provides on that basketball team, and he's not there. It's so apparent.
You want to know what I was impressed by, though? Honestly, in that Clippers game on Thursday, the Warriors were down by 13 at half. They were down by 12 late in the third quarter. Then it was a Moses Moody steal and an and one, followed by that Chris Paul buzzer beater, and suddenly it's a 6-point game. You get it to within 1 in the fourth quarter. I was honestly expecting, without Draymond Green, with the Clippers putting up 40 in the second quarter and getting everything they wanted offensively, I was kind of expecting this team to kind of just give up in that game. They fought back. They didn't quit.
No,
and a lot of it was the energy from Podziemski and Moody and all of that, and obviously Klay catching fire in the third. But I was honestly a little surprised, and I know we're trying to find the silver lining in a very, very difficult situation, another loss. There's Warrior games like that where they just give up and it's not even close in the second half.
And they had every reason to do that, right? They had every reason just to go away and hide and, all right, we don't have it tonight. There's no Draymond. There was self-pity was written all over that basketball game. But to your point, you're right. They made a game out of it. So, yeah, they have some mettle. There is personality even without Draymond. But with Draymond on the floor, it's not even so much of coming back from a deficit. It's just you have a completely different energy to you throughout the course of a game, and that's what he provides. And so without him, should you struggle and get 5-6 games, to me, if you get more than 6 or 7 games from the outside looking into the play-in tournament to the postseason, you're just there's not enough time in the season to make it up. And so the question then becomes, do you get ahead of that? Do you make a trade before it gets obvious to everybody that you've got to make a move? Do you, if you're Mike Dunleavy Jr., are you somebody that wants to beat everyone to the proverbial punch as far as making a trade and improving your basketball team?
And that means not getting off of the big three. Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Moving off of your young assets and trying to bring another veteran in here.
And specifically Jonathan Kuminga.
I don't know. So Mike Dunleavy on Thursday before the game against the Clippers was asked about the impact of the Draymond Green suspension and if that's going to have any effect on the future big picture roster decisions that he has to make going forward. And here's what the Warriors general manager had to say about that.
The bigger impact will be, how we do the next 15, 20 games. And that'll probably determine where we go more than this specific incident or this time away for him. The reality of the situation is if you're evaluating Draymond, his ability this year has been great. His availability is not. And so we need him more available because when he plays, he's really good. We're really good. And, that's the main thing. I don't think I need any more evaluation of Draymond as a player. We need a little bit more evaluation on this team and the chemistry and the lineups and all that. But from a basketball standpoint, honestly, pretty pleased with Draymond. We want to help him be on the court more, though.
So Mike Dunleavy asked the impact of Draymond's suspension on big roster decisions and shrugs it off and just says, well, it's more about our play.
And I think the 15 to 20 games, while it makes sense, it's what we've talked about, it could be too late. And usually, and I like everything he's done as a GM in the brief time he's been there. Usually, if you're a GM that's really good and has sustainability and is going to rebuild teams and rebuild winners, you think a little differently, whether that's the old thinking out of the box. And sometimes you've got to get ahead of that. You got to be proactive and you got to be more aggressive. Yeah, that was typical GM speak that we'll wait like everybody else and see where we're at after 3 weeks to a month. To me, that could be too late. And if you're a GM that really does things a different way and are really sort of one of those people that's able to, quote unquote, rebuild, you get active. You beat people to that punch. And I think he gave sort of an answer that we're all familiar with, but 3 to 5 weeks just could be too late for this Warrior basketball team.
It really could be, but you hear the way Mike Dunleavy and Steve Kerr has said the same things. You hear the way, and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson voicing support for Draymond Green. You hear the way they talk about Draymond Green. Obviously, Stephen Curry is secure here. And in my opinion, I don't see a move for Klay Thompson on the horizon, despite the fact that he's on the last year of his contract. I don't see that coming. So what does that leave? The Warriors are talking glowingly about Draymond Green. Despite his transgressions on the court, there's still a ton of support for him in that building. I think it's what you said earlier. His on-court ability outweighs all of the other stuff that you have to deal with him. Still, we haven't yet reached that tipping point. Maybe you will eventually, but he's still a good enough basketball player, at least from what we can gather about the Warriors' opinions on it, that they're willing to deal with this stuff. Now, maybe this is a step towards the tipping point, and maybe you eventually get there, but at the moment, it does not seem like the Warriors are there, unless they're putting up this facade, and who knows what happens there. But for the Golden State Warriors, it doesn't seem like they're willing to make a move there. And then what else does it leave? It leaves Chris Paul, and it leaves Kuminga, and it leaves Moody. So if there is a move that is trying to improve this Warriors basketball team, you're kind of by default left with everyone else. And it does not seem like we're going to get an end of the Big Three era this regular season. The Warriors might consider things this offseason. Maybe they simply don't re-sign Klay Thompson, and that's the end of the Big Three era. I would be shocked if something was to happen to those three, unless this team goes like 5-15 the rest of the next 20 games. Unless it's that bad and they really bottom out, I think the Big Three are safe for the rest of this regular season.
Well, Draymond Green, as we have talked about, I don't think is going because he's still a very effective basketball player. Now, you can talk about everything that he brings to this team and all the transgressions and the suspensions and the ejections. But when he comes back, and again, as this dissipates in the rearview mirror and as time elapses, he'll be back with the Warriors. He'll be effective again. And to a certain degree, all will be forgotten. Steph is Steph. I don't know that I can go there necessarily with Klay. It would not surprise me if Klay is dealt. If they don't feel as though they can re-sign him, the worst case scenario is that he signs with another team and you're left holding the bag. You got nothing for Klay Thompson. That, to me, is the question and the difficult questions that Mike Dunleavy has in front of him. Because you cannot, and I've repeatedly said this, you cannot have any sort of emotional attachment, sentimentality when it comes to being a relevant basketball team. All right? We'll have Klay Day. We love you. We know what it is that you've done. But all the moves that I make, including me re-signing Draymond Green, is for the betterment of this basketball team. It's for them to win games, get us back into the NBA Finals, and to win the Finals. If you do that, if you make sense in that vein alone, then yeah, we'll consider signing you. But if you don't, and we could trade you and get a piece that could put us back on that track, on that course, then you got to do it.
Well, then I guess I would just ask you the question that you're kind of putting out there. Do you not think Klay Thompson can impact winning at that level anymore? Because I think when you consider what would be available in a return that includes Klay Thompson, you'd have to attach a young piece or two. You'd have to attach a first-round pick. I'm not sure the Warriors are getting something back in return for Klay, 33 years old, final year of his deal, already has two major injuries under his belt. I don't think you're getting anything in return